is 2617.45. So we've spent 74.
Is it warm enough for everyone?
Warm enough for me right in front of the fan. Wow, this is Finance Committee heaven tonight. 4 of you?
We got you outnumbered.
Excellent. Very good.
Okay, good.
Very good. All right. So it's 7:06. This is Selectboard Finance Committee meeting on Monday, March 31st at 7 p.m. So we're starting at 7:06. There are 3, 4, 5. Are there any recording devices over there on your desk?
Not at present.
All right, good. 3, 4, 5. There are 5 audio recording and 1 video recording device. Okay?
It's fine. I saw it on YouTube the other day. I'm like,
Yeah, see, everybody can wave to Brian.
No
Good,
idea.
good, good. All right, so for the most part, tonight, we're going to be working on the budget, but I slid in some other things here that have a direct response to the budget. The first thing I wanted to discuss was to bring the Finance Committee up to date, that last week, Paulette Lucart served us with 4 open meeting law complaints at the end of our meeting last Monday night on various items, which, if you were following your expense report, we've got about $2,600 left in legal expense. How this is all going to sugar off is not quite, well, not sure. I'm certainly not sure. But I know that it's going to use some legal expense as a matter of routine. Last week, I had Mary forward those to town council so we can figure out the appropriate responses. But you need to be aware of that situation. And within 24 hours, we had a 5th complaint from Suzanne Corbett on very much the same topic.
It was from the meeting we had?
No.
Oh,
This is an assortment of 4 different types of things, from minutes going back to September of 2011 to very recent meetings where we discussed Selectmen's report. So there are 4 different topics, therefore being 4 different complaints. But we're trying to find our way through that.
Do you know how current the expenses are? Are we up to date in terms of paying bills that are legal?
That was as of 2 weeks, 2 weeks ago. Next,
All right.
at the end of this week, if any invoices come in, those
And
will be,
one has come in since then.
one has come in. You don't happen to know what the value of that is.
That'd be good to know.
I don't have it off the top of my head, I can go look if you want.
I think it's apropos to tonight's budget.
Do you have it where it's handy to put your finger on? Or no?
Good question, I guess, I'll look up.
Or Lynn would have it, probably.
No, I think I still have it. I've given her a copy, or I have a copy.
I don't think we need to stop the meeting to discuss that.
Okay, yeah, it might take me a minute to find it.
If you figured it was $400, right, or so, it would bring us down to $2,000. So anyway, we're probably running around $2,000 left in that account for this fiscal year. So, any questions or comments regarding, we want to bring you up to speed. I really think that next year's legal expense will be something much more than the $10,000 we have in there now. Yes, David.
Mr. Chairman, have we called our meetings to order?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I'll call it to order as a formality, but I took it that when Tom started, we have 4 members in attendance, so I called the finance committee meeting to order as well.
Was that was your question to the chair?
It's been answered.
Okay, good. So, I mean, if, I just don't see how, after Election Day and after the beginning of the fiscal year, that there will be less legal expense. I think the opportunity is there for a lot of different propositions. There've been 14 since the last town meeting. Right now, currently, we're at 14 open meeting law complaints.
And so these complaints can go back as far, obviously they're going back 3 years now. So.
Well, the year before, May to May, we had 18. So this current year that we're in, May to May, we're standing at 14, but we're not at May yet.
18 down to 14. Okay,
Still-
but I'm saying, people can make a complaint now, how far back? That we
Make
have
it
to-
until the open meeting law went into effect, which I think was June of 10.
So,
Don't hold me to that.
well, I'm just, we do need to plan. I think that's a great idea. We do need to plan, because the new laws, people aren't used to them.
And then along those lines, public record requests in 2013, May to May, were 35, and we're currently at 28. So things haven't let up that much. And I also anticipate they'll be worse.
Well, that's the situation. It looks like 10,000 may not be sufficient. If we were to renew that same line item at $10,000 in the amount, it sounds like we're going to go over this. You have an idea?
I mean, I think this is a fine example of how the law and this whole complaint business, one person, by filing a complaint or a number of complaints, automatically makes the decision of how the resources of the town are spent. Not only as money, but in time. I mean, time with people like yourself thinking about it, certainly with the select board having to go through it, and certainly the research and so forth that goes with it to come up with these things. So especially, I mean, it certainly has my attention this time of year when we have such big issues to address.
Excuse me, the 2,800 you said was being used for record copying, or?
No, that's what's left in legal expense.
Around 26.
Oh, that's
Around
what the
26,
balance is.
that's what's
Okay.
left out of the $10,000.
Okay, because I thought maybe we needed to also adjust not just legal expenses, but, like the salaries and the money that's going into answering this.
It's a good point, it's an issue I hadn't even contemplated, but I was
I mean,
thinking
we've
about how to
got
pay.
just 14,000 this year just for legal expenses, but there's everything else that's being put in that we need to be prepared for, obviously, because they're not going away.
They don't seem to, and I really don't think the atmosphere is right to think that they're going to go subside miraculously after town meeting.
So we just need to be ready for them. So we just need to know that we're going to have that in there. Hopefully it won't be used. An optimistic point, but
Anybody have any recommendations on a dollar to put in there?
I'd recommend 15, at least.
in 2013 we did 18. I recommend 20.
I'd be inclined, Mr. Chairman, to double this to 20 at this point. I mean, it's an estimate, you don't know what it's going to be.
Yep.
we could undershoot it, which would be a favorable variance, but,
But maybe we could, if we do overestimate in that, can we transfer that later on to helping the other supportive budgets that answer this?
well, yes, I think if you've got
Is that
an
a possibility?
underspent line item, that's always available subsequently at special town meetings for transfer to some other use, which could be, I don't know.
To help out
I
all the
would-
supportive accounts that are going to be drained from this anyways.
I would
And
hope
the pendulum is not swinging back yet, so we just have to be ready.
I think that's a really a great point, Janet. I just think it'll be nominal compared to what town council is. You know, those would be numbers that, as we move through the year, if we see that there's a deficiency in that, if it gets to the point where we don't have time to cover our general day-to-day, you know, there'll be time. I mean, this budget's gonna go together hard enough, but I think just like it would be foolish to ignore what winter roads actually cost, I think it would be foolish to ignore this legal expense line. So I'm in full agreement with $20,000.
Okay. 20.
David?
I'm in full agreement with $20,000.
All right. The other thing, while we're on open meeting law complaints, Ron, you're going on vacation, and these will have to be answered to some extent before you return. And since it's my opinion that Paulette won't be able to sign any or have input into the answers back to him because it would be a direct conflict of interest. How are we going to handle that if come Friday they need to be signed?
Oh, they have an extension.
No, but if there are answers available to sign, am I empowered as the chair to sign those?
Well, I would make a motion, but let me just think a second.
Because I think some of those can actually, and town council's working on them, I'm hoping that some of those can be answered.
Yeah, I would say, I'll make a motion that the chair be empowered with town council's advice to endorse them before and once.
I'll second that. Do you have, I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. You shouldn't be in a position to comment. That would be just another problem since you would be in a direct conflict of interest.
Well, I think the vote has to happen so that I can abstain.
No, but I'm having discussion on it now. I mean, and I was looking for any discussion that you have.
I think you should ask the question.
Not seeing any.
Well, yes, I do have a vote.
Okay.
If the board wants to reduce legal expenses for open meeting law complaints, stop violating the open meeting law, and the complaints will stop. But some of those things I've cited were within the control of this board to fix without incurring legal expense. The board chooses not to, the board chooses to violate, the board chooses to run up legal expense by handing it to town council. Not every board in the state of Massachusetts does that. So it's an option being chosen. But if there are no violations, there are no complaints.
But this board wasn't there in 2011.
He's mixed things up, so it sounds confusing. These violations were cited to the meeting of February 26th of this year. Everything there happened at that meeting.
So the motion on the select board's table is to authorize the chairman to sign any communications that the town council endorses in the absence of. There's a second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain?
Abstain.
Is it possible at this juncture to inquire a little bit more about the nature of these things? When you talk about a violation, or 4 is it in a particular meeting, are these the kinds of things that are in fact manageable in future? Paul, I guess what I'm trying to envisage is what is it that continues to lead to these repeated requests? Are you in a position to say anything about that at this point, or is it something that has to be adjudicated through the Attorney General and so forth?
I would be happy to send you a copy of all 4.
Okay. Have the adjudications of the Attorney General made any impact on all of this? Because don't these things all get forwarded there? And doesn't the Attorney General come back with some kind of an answer or some staff member?
When the board could choose corrective action itself and chooses not to, and forces it to end up with the Attorney General so that the Attorney General come back to tell you what to do, what you knew what to do 9 months ago. It's hard to be sympathetic. We're causing the problems.
So in each case, the Attorney General comes back with a remedy, is that right?
Or not. If they make a determination that the board violated, they tell you what to do.
Yeah.
If they make a determination that you didn't violate, they don't tell you anything to do.
All right. And so how many...
And there's more of the latter than there are the former.
We've had 3 out of 4 in the past 12 months that were against us and our meeting minutes, which has been a topic. How many meeting minutes did I vote against? Because they lacked specific details. And I would point it out to both of you repeatedly, and you would both vote against me. So, okay, that was the vote. And then you wait for the AG to come back and tell you to fix the minutes. It's really silly.
This is absurd because in all reality, what's happening here is when Paulette doesn't get her way relative to the minutes, dotting I, crossing I. Excuse me. She goes to the Attorney General, has one of her friends go and file. And by the way, they're not violations until they're deemed. And as what she said was that they were violations, nearly half of them aren't violations. Okay, they're deemed not violations. So it's just a very painful process to go through on a regular basis. And it's unfortunate. It really ties the hands of this group. And we have made big progress. The minutes for this year and 2013, they're all in the book. We have a much better system of getting them going back to the time when I wasn't even on the board. Paulette was on the board. There's 3 or 4 months worth of minutes that haven't been filed. And the complaint was served against us. Go figure. It makes no sense.
Ron, you misrepresent the truth.
I don't misrepresent
The
Paulette.
meeting
You
of
misrepresent.
No, I don't. The meeting of the 26th, we sat here at this table with a 28-minute conversation about OML 2014-10. And we didn't all agree, and that was okay. And Tom even said it would be on our next meeting. There is not word 1 in our minutes, and that is one of the violations I wrote up. Because every time I bring that stuff to this board and say, we didn't put something in the minutes, you two vote no, and you don't want anything in the minutes. So you deserved it. You won't bother to make your minutes correct. You seem to want to violate the open meeting law, so you left me no choice. None whatsoever.
Paulette, I'm trying to...
This can turn into a big back and forth, and I think it's better that the Attorney General address a lot of this, because I don't really believe it's a win situation. But I do know that going to the websites of other towns that put their minutes on the website, our minutes are excruciatingly detailed. And a matter of fact, I happen to know that there are people, and one of the reasons for increasing this legal expense is that there are people looking at other boards in this town that, even though they are well educated and cross-educated in open meeting law and public records and all that sort of thing, have had terrible agendas and are not keeping very good minutes, and it'll be up to those people that are looking at that to decide what they're going to file. But at some point, those things will be defensible or not defensible. What I can say is that I do side with Ron that we have made tremendous headway in managing minutes and trying to have minutes as complete as we can. One of the big things that I think with minutes is to try to take care of them, and the open meeting law states they need to be taken care of in a timely manner. And time again, with a very few exceptions, we take care of minutes in a timely manner as we can, which means the next meeting. All right?
If I can
But I do find it curious that the whole list of minutes that haven't been approved go back to September of 11, which it shadows the term of Paulette Lucar.
I was never chair. Nobody ever enforced
But-
doing the minutes.
But
You're not
that,
gonna make it my problem.
well, it was here. There's a common denominator is all that I'm noting.
Just as a matter of learning for me though, is the implication here that the only set of minutes that will stand muster or pass muster with the Attorney General is that they have to be unanimously approved by a committee or a board?
No, they need to be approved. Well, they need to be approved.
Okay.
My version of the story, Ted, is when I came on board in February of 13, all right, is that we got into the drill of approving minutes the week after, or at least within 2 weeks after we had the meeting. And then what I tried to do for a long period of time was approve one set of minutes for that meeting and then working back through the backlog of minutes. And we did that for a couple of months, several months, and worked our way back to a point where we got busy with a lot of other things. Budget, town meeting, Nexamp, all of that sort of thing. And really, I thought we were focusing on what was going on in the future of Ashfield and not so much with the past. And we didn't go back and do those past ones. I have no doubt that they need to be addressed. I have no doubt they need to be addressed. But it's a big burden on a board that wasn't there to stir it to begin with. David?
With a view toward civil compensation and good compensation. And this, several questions that are clearly from a finance committee perspective. So the first question is, I'm going to direct it to Paulette because I assume she may know more about this than anyone. Paulette, are there conditions by which these complaints can be withdrawn? Do you know?
I think once they're filed, it's up to the board to take a remedy action.
Yeah,
And then you don't,
but those who filed the petitions, do they have leave? Do they have the ability to withdraw these?
I honestly don't know what the process is. I haven't seen it stated anywhere.
Okay.
Is there a follow-up to that, David?
Yeah. On the assumption that the petitioners could withdraw, which I assume is possible or reasonable, would you assume that? That you could correspond with the Attorney General and request withdrawal?
The open meeting law complaint first comes to the board, and there's a process, and if the board takes action and remedies the problem, in most cases, people would say, okay, the problem got fixed, that's what I wanted, that's the end. It's only when whatever action the board takes, and I'm not being specific about this board, I'm talking in general, and if the person who filed the complaint disagrees, then they can forward it to the agent. So they don't automatically go to the agent.
So they could be withdrawn. because they only come to the town.
Mhm.
They could, if they wanted to, they could.
Oh, it'd be in the economic interest of the town. You and I would agree that where there's some remedy or way for the complaints to be withdrawn, it would be frankly in the interest of all concerned, and particularly in the financial interest of the towns. You'd agree with that premise, right?
I would agree that the board should take corrective action from whatever the complaints
Okay,
are.
well, that obviously has to be part of the answer. So now, I am not privy nor party to any of this, and I don't know, but it sounds to me like much of this has to do with the specificity of minutes. Is that a correct assumption on my part? That much of...
Or total lack thereof, yes. And in many cases, I think one would agree with me, some of the best minutes we had were actually done
Okay.
when Susan Clark did inscribe some minutes for us.
So the issue is then primarily or heavily about the specificity of minutes. Minutes, I suppose, can be overly specific, underly specific, just right specific, and that's in the eye of the beholder, right? Right?
Kind of like, what is the definition of is?
True. So I want to just ask you, Mr. Chairman, is there an exit ramp, an escape ramp that we have at our disposal?
We're gonna answer them the best we can.
Well, we can debate the issue of specificity, or couldn't we voluntarily offer, is there some impediment to offering greater specificity to minutes?
The AG,
I think that's a question that has to be asked.
the AG has a definition of what it wants your minutes to be.
Yeah.
About
well,
specificity.
Thank you, but now my question goes over to the chairman. Were we, if I understand this correctly, were we to voluntarily offer greater specificity to minutes, that could lead to satisfaction on the part of all? Aren't we in part, or wouldn't we be capable of saving ourselves some legal expense?
I think.
Fair question or not?
I think it's a very fair question, and the premise that you have with that is so rational. And I think that is what's missing when we talk about deciding how specific minutes should be, is that rationale. It needs to be a bit more than, here was the topic, here was a brief discussion, here was the motion, and this is how the vote is. Okay?
Right.
It needs to be a bit more than that, but it doesn't have to be he said, she said, and there was an email that came flying through the window,
Right.
3 weeks prior that may have influenced that.
Do you
It has to be the discussion. And even the Attorney General will tell you that, specificity is in the eye of the beholder. There can always be more. There may be enough, but there can always be more, and it gives a great hinge for debate. I met
But do we want to have the debate? And that's what we're talking about here. Can we escape the debate? If greater specificity, if there was no harm to the town in doing that, which would allow us to arrive at some accord, but there is risk and harm by defending our right to have lesser specificity, is this the issue, or am I missing something? Because by gosh, we might be the agents to be able to relieve the problem financially.
How,
I understand.
let me just be a bit more concrete if I might. If the three of you had a meeting, and there are minutes that get produced, of which two of you agree to them and you vote them, and the third person should take exception to the level of specificity, what would be the barrier to having the third person file, in effect, a dissenting opinion type brief that says, in addition to what was said in those minutes, I believe the following things also need to be specified? Is that the sort of a compromise that could work to the advantage of the town by saying, there was a vote, this was the majority opinion, 2-1 to be sure. But the third person then had an opportunity to say, I furthermore think these things should also be entered. That's an addendum, if you like, to the agreed set of minutes. Is that a workable solution or not?
That is a solution that has not been presented.
Is it a solution that the board could explore? For it would save us money.
I have proposed changes in the past and said June 3rd, 2013, regarding the OML that was filed because the minutes of April 8th lacked information regarding Kachina coming before this board. I even reported back that it did lack specificity and we could fix it. And both other members of this board voted and said it was just fine. So we got our hands slapped and we had to do it per the AG. We still didn't get it right then because Kachina never said no. And even though I pointed that out, you wouldn't take that out of the minutes. So for whatever reason, the two of you don't seem to want these things to be correct. The AG says that it's supposed to be that somebody can read the minutes and understand what happened at the meeting. And time again, I would propose a change, and you would both vote it was just dandy the way it was. Over and over again.
But Paulette, given that, let's say they
And it
exist,
is.
a change, is there anything to keep you from saying, here's another document that I'd like appended, which to me reflects more accurately some of the detail that was left out of the major report? Is that not a solution for you? Or?
I have a problem with that. The reason I have a problem with that is you could have some ambiguity. You could have, to the reader of those minutes,
Yes.
2 years from now, you have a select board set of minutes.
Yes,
And then you have a dissenting vote that says, this is how the minute should read.
yes, yes.
Okay, a dissenting, how does that person interpret those two things? In one set of minutes it says a person said yes, in another set of minutes it says a person said no. How do you deal with that?
Is it not like the Supreme Court where you have a 5-4 opinion, the 5 prevail, the 4 have filed something that's the same?
The right of a minority expression, and I'm assuming that probably you wouldn't have necessarily dissenting opinions on fact, but rather dissenting opinions as it bears to the matter of specificity or completion. And beyond that, people will see things different ways. But what would be the wrong in allowing that minority opinion? If indeed it would save us a lot of time, trouble, turmoil.
Let me give you an example. When you say minutes with specificity, it sounds so simple. Just be specific and get this thing taken care of.
Well, that's what this is all about.
Let me be specific. One of these open meeting law complaints, it's a complaint, is that Tom came in one night and he had done the select board report for the annual meeting. Okay, and it came up and we all 3 approved it. It was 3 in favor. And we got home and Paulette was concerned that we might have violated the open meeting law because it wasn't on the agenda. Now, we do have this section there for things that aren't anticipated. And a printing, going to press is one of those sort of things that had to get done. So that's one of those open meeting law complaints, right there. So they're not all dealing with specificity of minutes, they're dealing with he said, she said, and interpretation, and we talk about them. We say, we don't agree, we've looked at it, we're an organized board here, and we say we don't agree. And we should move on at that point in time. But we're never enabled to move on. It's always, here comes the open meeting law complaint the next day. If we don't, if there's some dissenting opinion on it.
I think the point, Ted, that you bring up, and Dave, you seem to be endorsing, in this particular situation, could be an out. But, remember, this is the first time that open meeting law complaints, to my knowledge, have been filed from someone on the board. We can't have everybody in the general public putting dissenting views in. All right? So remember, the vast majority of open meeting law complaints are not from members on the same board. This is a very unique situation.
It may well present a very unique opportunity because because the dispute is within the board possibly has the opportunity to resolve it.
And not go through legal expenses.
Seems to me that it's a little bit of a distinction between the Constitution and the Articles of Confederacy, where everybody can kind of go their own way. But we've spent 40 minutes discussing this, and we should be pretty much up to date on it.
Thank you for allowing us to express our thoughts civilly and your responses civilly and our concerns about the financials.
We'll make sure that it's reflected in the minutes.
You damn well better make sure.
All right. Okay, let's move on to the budget. David, you're really the high-profile guy, and I know that with your back, you may not want to stay too late. So why don't we attack this voc education budget?
Thanks, Tom. Board members, I think everybody at the front table here has a copy. I got one extra one. I'll let it circulate out there in the peanut gallery. It was about, 3 or 4 months ago, I chatted with you, updating you on our progress through the current year, and also talked to you about some anxieties that I had based on both local anecdotal evidence and things I was reading nationally and otherwise, that there is growing interest in vocational occupational education, and that we might be looking at an upsurge. When I prepared the first set of numbers back, sat down also with Mary and worked them through with her, we had one application in at that time. That was, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 weeks ago. And I was scratching my head, and of course the numbers we gave you for the initial budget planning purposes, Mr. Chairman, were without any hard information. And since then, and just recently, I went into the town office and took a look at the folder that says that holds the new applications for admission to Franklin Tech or to Smith School. And I knew it was bad news because it looked like this. And the phenomena is actually, we're now in an anomaly. And just recently I've got my hands on numbers. Remember, we're in sort of a consortium of 4 towns, Ashfield, Plainfield, and Charlemont. And Charlemont and Holly are probably statistically in worse shape than we are. We have, between the 4 towns with the applications still coming in, we have 20 new applications. In Ashfield, we have 10. This is probably doubling the highest number we've ever had in a single year. So the sheet that I have in front of you, if you take a look at it, I'm going to give you in 2 minutes the primer ramrod treatment as to where we are right now, and I want you to know that we're still in motion. It's a work in progress. Probably 10 days from now, we'll have some final information. Tonight I posted a meeting with the Vocational Advisory Education Committee. We'll meet a week from tomorrow in Plainfield. The representatives from the other towns are going to come in. Their numbers are up big time, as I mentioned. So, with the exception of Plainfield. So here's where we stand. Here are the raw numbers. And so that, Tom, when I talked with you earlier, this will at least give you a rough idea as to where we're headed. And the numbers could be above or below this. But this is probably the first educated guess with 80% of the stars coming into focus. In 10 days, we will have a final proposal. If you look at the sheet, we currently have 10 kids at Tech. We pay tuition. We're not a member town of Franklin Tech, nor are we a member of Smith. We have a 4-3-2-1, 4 freshmen, 3 sophomores, and on down. So the problem is we're only graduating 1 student at Tech. We have 6 new applications in. probably all or almost all of these students will be accepted, is my guess. Probably all or almost all will enroll. And we may have additional enrollments. But just based on these hard numbers, we're looking at a jump from 10 to 15 kids. Smith, the numbers are pretty much the same. In terms of percentage, we're up 50%. We currently have 4, we have 6 next year, more or less. This jump in enrollment, having 15 kids at Tech, right now we struggled using creative means to get them bussed in. I discussed some of this with you previously. We're kind of doing things the best way we can to get the job done. Okay? But there's no way in hell we can bus 15 kids in a 7-passenger van, 8-passenger van. So we're going to need the budget for a minivan now. That's a whole nother issue we're talking about, is how are we going to approach this transportation contract, gasoline and all that. We have bids in, and we're looking at, right now we're paying $140 a day, $144 a day for Tech transportation, and if we have to use a minibus, that's going to go up to $338. That's, I think my math is right, that's more than double. So, I have numbers in here. You can see what they are for transportation. We will need at least 2 vans for Smith. Our share of the Smith transportation is probably going to grow. I haven't sat down and crunched these numbers out, and that's where I think the number needs to be right now. So we're looking at $95,000 for transportation. I've done a run on special education expense. We'd have to obviously increase it due to the increase in enrollment, the increase in charges, and I've given you my best number there. I'm assuming a 4% tuition increase right now for budget purposes at both schools. Tech is a little higher than Smith. And then the question is, what do we put in for additional pads? We were talking about legal expense. If you really know you're going to spend more, is it responsible to budget less? And right now we're still in the enrollment period. It's about to close. But how many pads? Well, based on what we've used historically in my years as business manager, and the fact that we have other, before we even get into the pads, we have other possible applications coming in. For right now, I'd say put 2.5 pads in for Smith and 2.5 for Tech. So you add all these numbers up, and you can...
2.5 students extra for
each
for
school.
both.
Yes. To cover the last minute enrollments, the surprise stuff that comes along in the summer, the possibility of mid-year enrollments. Now that pad is a number we may have to revisit.
Sure.
And we may have to really, just gamble a little bit more. But for right now, if this were a normal year and I was going to say, what would you want to do for responsible budgeting? That's what I would say you want to do so you don't get burned in the middle of the year. So the bottom line numbers are right on the sheet. These numbers right now, again, they're subject to change. They could go up or down. But I'd say we'd want to be looking at somewhere in the mid-5s. 562 is the number I have here. And that's a big ouch because we're looking at only expending 298 this year. This is a big problem. The number that Mary and I worked up earlier, we were sure it was very, very safe, and if anything, that number was going to come down as we had clearer information. But as I reported to Ted and my colleagues here, that spike has hit us, and it's hit us hard, and it's hit us actually a little earlier than expected. The good news is at the bottom of the sheet, I report to you, I projected our current fiscal year. Our appropriation at town meeting was $320 based on transfers and encumbrances added back and special town meeting transfers. We have an available $325. My professional opinion is we'll expend $298 unless something weird happens. So we'll have $27,000 to the good. So I've been, sort of hailed as a hero, all along. Oh, good old Dave Newell knows how to save the money and all of that. And it's not really been me, but we are at the end of the good news era, and we are entering the enrollment spike. And so
Well, you're still a hero, Dave.
That's where, well, oh, thank you, Tom.
Well, even though you're bringing us bad news, it's better to bring it to us than to have it thrust upon us.
And I urge you not to kill the messenger in this case, because he makes a huge difference in this whole process of trying to analyze what, for most people, has been a pretty much of a black hole in vocational ed. He's done a lot to help us save money this year, and I'm impressed with his incisive analysis, all of which fits on a single page, you'll notice. And I think he explains it with clarity and conviction and the kind of experience base that gives us a lot of confidence in what he's doing. You could nibble around at the edges and talk about maybe taking a Smith baseline plus 1.5 pad or something like that, but you're really talking about small money. And I think the degree to which he's thought this through brings real distinction, not only his work, but certainly helps our finance committee, I think, represent this as a pretty important and significant kind of cost increase, because you're talking about, given his figures, if we're going to spend about $300,000 in vocational ed this year and go to a figure in the mid-500s, 562 for example, that's almost a 90% increase in that one line item. That's a big line item. And so this is valuable work, and I think it's helpful to us all. Thanks, David.
Yes, absolutely.
Good question. The additional students we see coming in, do we have any way of knowing, are they coming in like they're freshmen, so they're coming in early and you can almost see, as long as they like the program, they're going to be there for 4 years?
Some are coming in as sophomores. I know one.
Some sophomores?
We have 10 applications in, 9 of which would be entering freshmen, 1, as Janet points out, would be sophomore. I also want to point out the fact that the transportation numbers assume that we will have the contractor buy gas. That's a higher amount. And until the board commits to that concept, these higher numbers will be in here. I should point that out.
Part of that scheme with not having the contractor purchase gasoline is to have the other towns approve of following that procedure also.
Interestingly, tonight, Charlemont and Plainfield are taking it up, as you are, and Holly has approved the change. That's where we stand on the gas line approach.
So if I read this right, that Y15 budget, you came at 562, 690 estimate. We have 27, we have 27,000 left over.
From this year.
From this year.
Right.
So we're looking at 535,613.
One way to look at it, yeah. That's a rosier way to look at it.
Well,
David, I have a couple quick questions, just because I don't have last year's notes with me.
Yes.
What was our enrollment last year?
When you say last year, right now we have 10 at Tech and 4 at Smith.
10 and 4?
10 and
And
4.
what was the cost per student last year?
Well,
You know, this is
depends,
27.
including transportation.
This includes transportation in 27?
Well,
It
let
does.
me answer your question very quickly. 14. Right now, when you mean last year, in other words, the year prior, around 21,000 students.
21.
Around 21, including transportation and special education.
Okay. And the bulk of the increases in the transportation?
The bulk of the increase is in the increase in the number of kids. That's the...
No, per.
Oh,
It went from
in terms-
27 grand to 21.
Equalized, the
Yeah.
big increase, we're coming off a 5-year contract, moving into a new 5-year contract.
Transportation.
Transportation.
That's
is
what I
above
was
it.
at. Okay.
I mean, our kids ride on 3 routes. One of the routes we fund entirely, which goes to Tech. That route is going to at least double because of the bids, because of the gas problem, and also possibly be compounded because of the fact that we may have to use a bus instead of a van.
So 25% increase mostly because of the transportation, it sounds like. Per student.
Equalized, because more so, I'd say transportation, I'm pulling this number out of here, but I'd say transportation is ramming 25% up, while tuition on an equalized basis is 4%.
4%, right. Thanks.
And compounded with the number of kids, that's the primary problem.
Mary?
Primarily because due to Kyle Taylor over here, who was a successful tech graduate, earned many awards, gave a tremendous, glowing, a positive recommendation to vocational education to the young people of Ashfield. And, we have a lot of people who want to be like Kyle Taylor.
There's the trouble.
There's the trouble, right out there.
Mary, the treasurer, last year we encumbered money forward. Any idea on what the policy is with that? I mean, could we encumber, if we end up with $27,000 this year,
I believe that
could we encumber that to go into the next fiscal year?
I don't think you can.
I believe that we can, because it's a item only for vocational. I think that's how we got to encumber it before, although we didn't encumber all of it. But I will see Joyce tomorrow, so I'll have a better answer then. I think the answer may be yes, but
I almost think it was because we were able to encumber it because we still had that question about the tuition bill.
But, yeah, we had to act on that, and you'll see it at the bottom of your page down here, that's where the $8,000 appears. But I think the more logical way to go at it, that would conform with state reporting requirements, and that's why I put this report to you on the bottom here, is that this is, in essence, you can anticipate a $27,000 surplus to your next year's certified free cash. So know that that's on the table. And that would argue a greater, earlier utilization of free cash to fund next year's budget.
and I'm sorry if I made you both right. I had forgotten we encumbered that specifically based on the anticipation that there was a bill that we hadn't received. So.
And just to follow up David's point, I think the way I look at this now is that if we take David's number of the projected costs for vocational education next year to be $562,000, call it $700, just to round that $10. That, instead of what we've got currently as a placeholder on our master budget worksheet, is $441,000. That was an earlier estimate, just kind of guessing as to what this might be.
Assumed to be too high.
Yeah. The difference is, or the additional money that would be needed, is $121,700. So that's as if we're saying, instead of the $441,000, we need another $127,000 to get to the $562,700. That's an additional expense that we're now projecting for the coming year. And arguably we've got enough free cash to cover that, although it drastically depletes our free cash. But as David points out, if we anticipate a $27,000 savings this year, that will go toward replenishing that free cash next year. Once it gets certified. 27. Yeah.
The bottom number, the bottom half of the sheet is reliable. Obviously much more so than the top half of the sheet, which is still a work in progress. But I think what Ted says is right on the money.
Tom?
I know you guys were at the last meeting, I don't know if they caught up, but we had a lot of free cash being spent to balance the budget before, so I don't know if you guys are
I saw the
aware of that.
$89,000 total free cash that's been obligated for a couple of chunks of money. And I had questions about what that was all about.
So I would question whether we have more free cash to continue spending free cash. We've already allocated a lot to be spent out of free cash.
That last meeting,
Yeah.
we came into the meeting figuring we were, I believe, $85,000 $1,000 in different accounts that we decreased.
Yep, I saw that.
But there were also funds where we were trying to split up what would come from free cash or not, just trying to work it back down under the levy. I think that's part of the bigger question. And when I spoke earlier, since we're on vote, I'd like to stay on that.
That's fine.
I spoke with David earlier, you know, that in the next 10 days, these numbers will be a whole lot firmer than walking on jelly.
And possibly very different one way or the other, yeah. But
it
know
was-
that we're probably headed for something this.
Right, so probably the thing is, tonight probably isn't the number as much as the formula that we should apply.
Or the combination of approaches.
But my question is, now that I've said that, I'm going to go opposite to that just a bit. Would everyone agree that when you apply the tuition numbers, that a 14% cushion would be enough? Because if you took your pad down to 1.5 or 3 students total, 3 divided by the 21 students we're anticipating is a 14% cushion. And I appreciate the 5, but I wonder if that isn't a bit overstated when we're trying to make the budget fit within a box.
You're right on the money, and that's a good observation. The reason that number is in here on this thing that says these numbers will change in September is what I'm more concerned about is not so much the pads that we need. I think last year we had a total of 4 pads in the budget, 3.5 or 4 pads. I'm worried about the last week because it's still open enrollment, and what I fear the most is Mary opens the mail in the next week and find 3 more applications. Once we get by 1 more week and the last stuff has been mailed out of Mohawk, I think the pads can come down. Of course, it's possible if we have new enrollments, the baseline will go up. But I'm most scared about, you know, how people are when they file things. When you file your taxes, usually off around the 14th or 15th of April when you send it in, and that's why I'm afraid some of these
I hope
folks-
like hell that the 15th is going to fall on Patriots Day, so we get an extra day.
Right. But once we get 1 more week behind us, I'm inclined, I agree, I'm inclined to think that we should go very conservatively with the pads and take risk. Should we have no pads? No, I don't think that would be wise, but I think we can shrink the pad down.
Well, we just know that this is going to be a challenge, and I can't see how other lines aren't going to get sharpened up, so I don't see why this one, this one could. If we cut that from 5 to 3, that would reduce that by $34,150.
Well, I'll tell you what I have in mind, and I spoke about this the last time I talked to you about vocational matters, and that would be to bring the pads down to a very, very spare level. Now, can we, and why would we do that? Possibly, I don't think it would be responsible to budget the busing any less than we currently have, and that may get revised. But at the last meeting I talked to you about, can we be creative, and can we be bold, and can we look at ways I talked about, for example, can we meet with our parents, and can we work with our contractor and eliminate the need to put a bus on? Can we somehow get cooperation from parents to bring kids to central spots, and if neighbors or South Ashfield locations? And work with the Conway Tech Bus and the Buckland Tech Bus and have those buses come up here. In other words, that one bus is going to cost us $61,000, and I mean, would I recommend that we budget on that assumption? Hell no. Technically there are issues such as state law that we have to worry about. But I think it could be done, just like we worked out busing issues this year with parent help, voluntarily bringing them down to LaBelle's. That's how we managed to make it all fit. So can we turn to our parents, our citizens, our students, and ask for, doing what, the kids at the academy at Charlemont are used to? Is that fair? Can that work? Are the parents able to do it? I'm not saying that we do it. As I said last time, I'm saying we explore it. And geez, if we did that, we could save $50,000. So if we have a chance of saving that amount of money, if we have a chance, then I think that warrants having greater confidence in saying, okay, cut the pads.
Do you have any issues if we're trying to make certain, or ask, because I don't mean that we're making you do it, a certain group of students going to different schools have to make different accommodations for transportation than we do with the rest of the kids who get bused to Mohawk? I just think we need to be careful. It's one thing to ask and everybody agrees, but if anybody's complaining that they don't want to do it, probably hard pressed.
That's a very good point. I commend you for making that point. And there's lots of what I call gray zone things. For maybe we won't be able to go all the way. Under no conditions would I support, Paulette, any game plan that would force a parent to do something or a student to do something that they're unwilling to do. Maybe half of them can do it. What would happen, for example, if half of them were able to do it and half of them were unable to do it? And so what we end up doing is take the volunteers, and those folks go over to the neighbors and get the Buckland bus to pick them up, and then the others will take care of. And maybe instead of worrying about 15 to be transported, half of them would only be 7 or 8, and then we could use a van instead of a bus, and we would save $15,000. So those are. That's the kind of approach that I envision. I want to go after this. I've been appointed by the Finance Committee. You have told the Finance Committee to administer this department, which is the #2 expenditure in our town. And now with these numbers, we were tied with the Highway Department. I'm sure we're going to be way the hell above them. We're now after the public schools. We're the #2 department measured in terms of dollars and cents. And so if we continue to have your support, and the Finance Committee continues to work together, and David Knoll continues to have fun with this, and hopefully this has been just a hell of a lot of fun, we can continue to try to make it work. It's going to be reaching out, asking people to meet us halfway, And it's funny, because the experiences that I had in the last 6 months setting this up, where I talked to a parent on Cape Street, a parent on Ashfield Mountain, a parent on Buckland Road, and when they said, I said, well, geez, could you give us a hand on this? They said, we want to help. What can I do? There was one fellow who needed a letter for whatever, I won't go into the details. He was so enthusiastic, it was on my desk 3 hours later. He said, let me do it, and I'm going to drive it right up to you.
David, is there any possibility, I know you must have thought of this, but it just occurs to me, you have these buses for Mohawk, the district, going by all this route. Is there any possibility that the school systems, the tech versus the public district school, can somehow coordinate so that the buses could drop the tech kids off at neighbors, or at a place that they could then be transported from?
You want a candid, honest answer, or do you want a politically safe answer? Which way do you want?
Take your pick.
You're being recorded.
You're being recorded.
I'll be safe. I think that's a very good idea. I think it would be very difficult to implement, given current conditions, and I'll leave it at that. But that
Nice idea.
is that's not just a nice idea. That I think is the way to go. But it's not going to be something that I think we can achieve shortly. You're right. There's a lot of, the reality run. I'll just amplify that by saying, I had a call from someone a little over a year ago, and this gets into complex issues, who watched the tech van with Ashfield kids go down Route 112, following the Buckland bus, which is under tech contract, half empty.
Yeah, exactly.
Going down to the same school, on the same road, one behind the other, and he asked, why couldn't those kids be put onto that bus?
That wasn't even a quarter full.
Yeah. Now, the answer as to why that is far
So what-
more time than you want to listen to.
So what, between,
There's a real reason why they can't put them together. There is a reason, they will state why.
There's not a good reason, but there's a reason.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
So we're chipping away at this. I mean, we've been chipping away at this, and there's plenty more room to go, and there's a lot of this expense here that you have on this sheet that, believe me, if I was the emperor of ice cream, we'd have lower numbers here. And the ideas that you're suggesting or talking about, those are the kind of things that we are trying to do. We're gaining. We've made some accomplishments.
and you have a working relationship from what I've seen with the contractor.
Yeah, and this is, it's like herding cats. We're working with 3 other towns to make this work. We're working with Mohawk to and with the contractor and keeping everybody happy.
So what is a realistic number to put into this worksheet tonight?
The number you have right here.
I think the one you stay with what we've got here for right now.
562.
Yeah, understanding that in a week or two, that might be revised
Yeah,
substantially.
563.
And it's a function, I think, of what we learn about any further enrollments or applications, and what we learn about the degree of interest of the other towns going forward on this gas line contract, because that could affect the...
That can bring us down.
Yeah.
That can bring us down.
Well, in 10 days, we should have a better idea of how many pads. We may not have all the I's dotted and T's crossed, but that could have a $30,000, $35,000 impact on what our budget is.
When I last met with you, we talked about, on vocational at least, we talked about the proposal to have municipal gas purchase. I don't know what the minutes of that meeting say or what you guys voted exactly. I sort of thought I came away from the meeting that you were satisfied with that approach. Holly has since approved it, and I believe Charlemont will approve it tonight, and I think it's either tonight or shortly Plainfield will be dealing with it. They have balked, as I understand, because they understand that there are questions in Ashfield about this.
About
Whether the town of Ashfield should furnish gas for vocational education. That's what I'm informed.
My only question is, what is it going to take to administer that? And are we equipped to do that and to have enough gas on hand at all times and to make sure we have suitable control? That's my question.
Well, here's the deal, Tom. In 10 days at the most, essentially a little over a week, I'm going to give you a budget, and it's going to be based on the assumption that we're going to go the high-cost approach on gas or the low-cost approach. And if the decision is still up in the air, obviously I'm going to give you a budget recommendation that we're going high cost, right? Now, I think the answer is, I think the answer is that we can do it. I'm going off my mind. I think we're looking at 7,000 gallons, and probably it'll be diesel and gas, because if we use a minibus, we're going to have to use diesel, right? And if we're talking 7,000 gallons, that's about 10 months of operation, 700 gallons a month, if my math's right. I know when I talked, I want to be totally honest with you, when I talked to Tom Poisson about this, and he saw that it could work, but he also pointed out that there was a downside. Let me repeat that downside, and that is that the aggregate purchase of gasoline and diesel would bump them up so that they would have to move away from formal quotation by telephone method to probably dealing with a bid. And that would be a pain in the neck. When I was a business manager, I much preferred using the quotation approach because frankly, we got better deals going that route than we did if we went formal bid. So that's a downside. What are we really looking at? Again, there are so many variables here, including how many kids from other towns. But I'd say it sugars down to this. Maybe I'm too low on this, but if you go the municipal purchase of gas, the upside is we're probably going to save $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 off of this sheet. That's compared to 562. That looks like a drop in the bucket, but compared to $100 for the dog catcher, it's a lot of money. You know, it depends on how you look at it.
Well, 5,000, 5,600 would be 1%.
Yeah. So it depends on how you look at it. The downside is that we're going to have to bill the towns quarterly. We'll be billing Charlemont, Hawley, and Plainfield. I was impressed with how it's administered in terms of the cards that are swiped. So the driver goes in, if he gasses up, he swipes his card. Electronically, the gas up is into the computer, and it's printed out monthly. I mean, as it is right now, we have many different departments using the gasoline, fire department and council on aging and police and highway and so forth and so on. So we'd be having one more department do it. It's not my call. I did my best to come up with what I think to be ways that we could save money. This one's got a little bit of backlash to it.
Here's a point that needs to be addressed, is that taxed gasoline and untaxed gasoline look exactly the same. Taxed diesel fuel and untaxed diesel fuel look absolutely opposite to each other. And I'm wondering, when a bus gets inspected and they stick the tank and find red fuel in a privately operated bus, how that doesn't turn into a fine. That's a question to be looked into. If there's an answer or a letter that can be with that bus saying this is the reason, that's fine. But I just want it to be an issue that doesn't go unanswered, and then next fall at an inspection site that they find. When we were talking about gasoline, it wasn't a problem.
When I worked at Mohawk, I worked for a couple of years half-time at South Victorian Regional. They ran their own buses, they bought their own gasoline, and they got a break.
But that was a municipally owned bus.
That was a municipally owned bus. Kosmeskis has private contracts with Franklin County towns where other towns, in other words, this is not anything new, other towns are doing this for the purpose of not just because of the problem with the bid that I explained to you, but because if you look at your municipal tax bill, your state taxes are on that bill, but the federal taxes aren't. So that's another reason to look at
I just want us to be aware. I mean, maybe that's something you need to speak to Darlene about, is how the workaround is that. Because all the diesel fuel that we get is dyed fuel, to my knowledge.
I think she talked about New Salem and Wendell do it.
So, it's just,
So I guess they got.
I just don't want anybody to be blindsided, that's all I'm.
Yeah. Well, so respectable boards, select board members. I guess the question I have for you is, I am going to give you a budget in 10 days or less. It'll be run by the finance committee. And do I prepare that budget on the assumption the town of Ashfield is buying gas from 3 routes or not?
I'd like to see both sides of it. If it makes a difference if it ends up being a $1,500 savings or a $7,500 savings.
If you balk, my sense is that Plainfield will balk, even though Charlemont and Hawley go, and that means we're going to be rammed into the high-cost amount, which is fine. I can respect not acting on this for certain reasons. Administrative difficulties, complexity, you have to bid it instead of, or whatever. All I'm saying is, I want to know, and if you're telling me your answer is, maybe, then I'm going in with a high number, I'll give you what the low number will be, but that's also triggering what the hell's going to happen in Hawley, Plainfield, and Charlemont.
Hey, if
We will not be able to rely on these reductions.
if we were one of those other towns that wasn't central to the bus routes, that would make all the convenience of handling that, I'd be on board in a minute.
So,
I can see the other town saying, well, God, if Ashfield wants to shoulder it all, heave it on them. And I'm fine with us doing it, and I'm all for saving money, but I'd like to have an idea of how much money we're talking about. And you've already
about
got,
$5,000 to $7,000.
and it could be more by the time we're next, but that's not inclusive of whatever the route changes are. That's just the
That's
fuel.
just that based on these assumptions. Obviously, if we cut a route, like have parents handle Franklin Tech, our savings will be less. I mean, this,
What's the rest of the board? What's the position of the rest of the board?
I guess I'd like to see both sides of it, go in with the conservative approach, but let us know what the savings could be. I mean, if you're telling us what the savings is now, you're saying
I'm estimating. I'm estimating.
But in less than 10 days, you're going to have new data on the whole sheet, right?
Yeah, but Ron, I don't think the numbers on gas are going to change much.
But on the others, it could.
The tuition stuff is where the action is.
Yeah.
David, the numbers on the fuel are not going to be modified much by configuration of vans and buses and so on, or that's sort of a matter of indifference, isn't it, really, or not?
It could grow a little. A lot of that depends on where these new kids are living.
Yeah.
So, and that, but generally, most of your mileage, think of it this way. For a van that serves, say, Ashfield kids going to Smith, no matter where your kids live, you're going to be running from Ward's Corner all the way to Northampton. That never changes. The only thing that changes is whether you're going to Apple Valley or not, or you might be out to Bellis Road, or, it's locally. And so the overall mileage is most of it is the run to Ham and back. And locally, it may change a little bit so that the total change is not terribly significant. Obviously, if there's more gas we buy, there's more we save.
Let me ask this question. What date to work with the bus company is necessary to make this decision? Can it be made as late as August 1st when the bus routes are finalized?
I don't think that would be practical, but let me answer it this way. Do we have to make a decision in the next week or two? No. I think it would be practical if we're going to make a decision on this to either Fisher Cut Bay in May or June at the latest. Carrying it any later than that, if that were the case, then my recommendation to you would be go with a bid, swallow the high prices, and move on.
And a bigger impact may yet be ahead of us insofar as the Finance Committee has endorsed this whole idea of working with parents, exploring with them whether any kind of transportation option that we might be able to achieve here, whereby parents, maybe all, but maybe some, would be willing to transport their youngsters to a common collection point, by which time we could maybe modify or even drop the need for certain vans in a way that has a big impact as well. So there's the fuel cost, and there's also the parent participation angle that might be.
Sure.
Those are the two things we can do to combat this. One is that, I've scratched my head, and the Finance Committee has certainly been really helpful in serving as a sounding board and offering suggestions. What Ted says is right. The only two things other than arresting and sending these 10 kids off to a detention facility out of town is the only two things that we really have a control over are gasoline, and actually the larger one is roll your sleeves up and seeing if our parents will play ball with us and cooperate. The savings, if that was successful, even if it was only halfway, Paula, would be substantially more, because, I mean, we're looking at $61,000 for one bus.
We never discussed the detention option, I like that.
The detention option I have developed, it's in this binder here. If you want to get into it, and then there'll be no loss of life, guaranteed.
Any savings you're able to eke out of this, with everything you said, it looks to me, as you look at the budget, where now we're trying to factor in for roughly $120,000, every nickel and dime is going to count together this year, more so than I think looking at budget.
I think I heard more of your point, but I'm not sure I heard your question.
It was more of a statement that I think you're on the right track in terms of any savings you're able to negotiate for the town. I think every nickel and dime this year counts. Even if we say, oh, it's only 1,000 or 2,000, I think there are some big costs here that making that budget finally work at the end is going to be difficult.
Agree, and I mean, let's assume the number is on the lower end and it's around 5,000. And also know that the other towns will be saving some amounts as well. And Raleigh, for example, is, I think, looking forward to saving what it can. But all of us have to agree to make this work. So if Aldi approves and Charlemont approves, et cetera, and Ashfield dissents, then we're all done. We're going back to plan A. This is done.
So you wouldn't find it prudent to budget the higher figure and then make the decision when you have a better idea of what things are going to look. Remember, this is, it seems to me that it's a converse relationship. As the price of fuel goes up, our savings are going to decline. If our price of fuel goes up 30 cents, our projected savings will decline.
Generally speaking, the answer is yes, you're right. Yeah. If it goes up, yeah. It's not that simple, but that's generally more right than wrong. But, frankly, this is a way to save thousands of dollars a year. And remember, the decision we're making is going to stick for 5 years.
That's the issue, is that we're not going to be buying fuel on a bid 5 years in advance. Okay? Crude oil hits $125 a barrel. What does that do to gasoline?
Yeah. I mean, if we're looking at,
It's not that I'm opposed to gambling. I gamble my own money every day of the week. But maybe the town's money, I'm not quite so apt to do that.
It's not going to be that simple. If gas goes to $7 a gallon, don't think for a minute that we're going to ride on this contract without consequences. If we were to make the contractor purchase the gas, they still have a partial gas escalation clause that will catch up with us, number one. Number two, if it's a really bad deal for the contractor, then the contractor is not going to continue with the contract. Just like for a student, didn't continue with the contract we're at right now, and that contract was sold to Travel Plus. There's no such thing as free lunch. I mean, it's not like we can gamble and win on the assumption that gas is going to go up, so we want it. That's not going to get us out from under. My gut tells me, I'm reading tea leaves as well as you, that we're probably looking at gas in the threes for the foreseeable future on that assumption. And what I know is that we're paying a contract rate that's driven by $4.25 gas. And that's what made me mad when I looked at this in the first place. And I said, why are we doing this?
David, I have a quick question. How big is the fuel tank? 4,000 gallons?
I think we have what is it, 1 and 2 down at the highway department?
Yeah,
1,000 and 2,000.
1,000 of gasoline, 2,000 of diesel fuel.
if what Tommy said, or I don't know who said it, that by getting this increase in volume, you would have to go through a different procurement process, right? A bid process versus an over-the-phone thing. Does that amount to something like 5 cents a gallon that you could say times 2,000? I mean, does it justify itself? Does the $5,000 savings on the surface, is it really 5,000 or might it be? I don't know what that bid process is. I don't know if the market is low and you can go and pick up the phone and get it at a decrease in price versus having to go out to bid and deal with some locked-in rate with baseline, sort of rate, like you buy propane or something like that. I don't know if you'd lose your $5,000. I'd hate to say that'd be a great idea and then lose it on the other side.
Well, you won't really know the difference, and frankly, you might actually end up doing better by bid than by phone quote.
True.
You might. The point is, I think Tom saw it as an inconvenience.
Mhm.
Yeah. Just one tiny point to that. I think it's, it may also have, I believe it also has to do with the fact that if you go to bid, you usually have to tell them how many gallons you're going to use. With the quotes, in some cases, we've been able to say we will use about and not get into the situation that we've gotten into in some cases before, where you're paying for unused gas or paying for storage. So I think that may play into it too.
My gut tells me that the worst position we would be in over 5 years, and this is just a gut feeling, is probably the worst position we would find ourselves in, is we would end up in the same spot.
Maybe.
Well, I just look out, in the course of this, we're going to be looking at 3 congressional elections, a presidential election, and God knows how many border disputes. There's a lot of things that can happen to the price of fuel, and we've seen it before. Seems like $4 is the magic. Nobody seems to really care too much until it gets to $4. Something magic about that.
Well,
But
let me close. I think you've probably put enough time into it. So I'm going to ask you, I'll respect your judgment either way, but I want a clear, crisp directive as to how you want me to proceed with preparing our budget. And also, there's a message that has to be given to the other 3 towns. They obviously would benefit from Ashfield's willingness to do this. So you have to answer this. Remember, the last time I left you, you felt pretty strong about it. You're expressing some logical reservations and concerns. You're asking some good questions. But we're now kind of coming up to the evangelist's hour where I've got to come down in front of the sawdust pit and make a decision as to whether I'm giving my life for gas or not, whether we're going left or whether we're going right on this. So which way?
So
Where am I going?
the reading you're getting
What do we
is
tell
that
the
the
other
other towns aren't willing to budget the higher number and then come to the savings in June or May when we have maybe some better numbers on what.
All right, let me. I talked with John Sears, who's select board member in Hawley, and they reviewed the proposal at length. They're pleased with the willingness of Ashfield to do this. Because of this, their numbers will be a little bit lower. They have formally approved it. Charlemont is quite likely going to be formally approving it tonight. And they've got a big spike in enrollment. So at 10 a.m. in the Plainfield Town offices next Tuesday, April 8th, I've got to sashay my way into that meeting as the clerk and acting chair of the advisory committee, and I got to tell them what's going down in Ashfield. know, following that meeting, whether I'm using these numbers or these numbers for the budget that I'm going to present to my chairman and his colleagues and to you.
It sounds to me, David, not to presuppose what the select board would respond with, but it sounds to me as though the safe way to go forward is to say, for the time being, notwithstanding our interest in pursuing the lower cost municipal purchase of gasoline, which has yet to be formally decided by our select board, people should use the higher dollar amount that you're proposing here for us, for example, until such time as we give the green light. And the fact that they've approved these approaches to participating in our municipal gas purchase, the only thing that they're burdened with is the realization they've got to, for the time being, hold a higher estimate for their budget, with the understanding that within probably 2 to 3 weeks now, Ashfield might be able to give them the good news that, guess what, we're going forward, and you can save yourself a bit of money in the following days.
Okay.
I think that's the only realistic thing to say, because I'm hearing the board here understandably say we've got a few more concerns, and we're going to bear the burden of this administratively for 5 years. I think it's an ingenious way to save money. I would hope we can go forward with it, but I think that's the realistic
Well,
point.
here's where I'm at, is I'm thinking if my scenario of 5 years that would be even, even's not a terrible place to be. And
If we buy our own gas.
right, and I think especially in David's position, what just struck me is that we rely on these other towns for a lot of cooperation in working out these bus routes and so forth. And if they're willing to do it, and I can certainly understand why they'd be willing to do it, if we're carrying the, whatever extra there is, and time will tell. I think it would foster a lot of cooperation in trying to keep these bus routes and making them see that. I'm almost going to the point where I would say, let's try to save whatever we can. I mean, saving 1% on the budget would be huge. If we save 0.5%, I mean, none of us would turn that away, right?
Well, these other towns
To find it stuffed in our coffee cup in the morning.
are small, and any savings they can eke out of this is probably significant to them as well, even if it's just 1%. But everybody trying to do it and working together, there's a goal for doing it, other than, oh, never mind, we'll just pay the full price and forget about it. It's hard to want to keep participating.
I'm going to make a motion that we direct David to tell the other towns that we're willing to work through this gas scheme. Scheme is probably not the right word, but this town purchased fuel contract.
It's almost a solution to saving some money.
I'll second it.
Do we need to discuss it anymore?
I would just say, on top of it, that if Tommy finds that administratively it becomes burdensome, that at some point those other towns should share in the burden, obviously. I mean, we shouldn't carry the whole burden of it. If there's no burden, then fine, let's all share and get the price reduction and take the risk together.
I think there will be a little burden to it. I don't know how much, if it's insignificant. I just know that we don't seem to have a real good batting average as far as keeping up to date on fuel being charged to the fire department and the police department on a monthly basis. This might be just the thing to do all of it. This will have to be done.
Why does it not?
It just,
I mean, if you have the card, why isn't it happening?
it just doesn't seem to get done. I mean, if you look at the fuel use and so forth, we're not brought up to date on that. brought up to date twice a year.
I'm just reminded of something that Tom touched upon. It was a year ago that I was just started on the finance committee, and we saw that there was wanton waste and rooting, and to make a long story simple, it meant a change, cutting a van would save all of the town's $37,000 a year rate, and it really kind of required our friends in Plainfield to, would you be willing to let our kids ride on your van? And I went over to the select board meeting in Plainfield, and we had a nice chat, and they went along with it. And we both saved a lot of money.
So, I mean, that's where I think it would foster a little bit of goodwill. So, any other discussion here on this board? All those in favor say aye. Aye. It's unanimous. There, is that the clear, crisp direction you were just asking for? I hope so.
Yes, it is.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else on vocational school? I hope not. How about if we move on to the police department? Diane, come up front and assume the position. I just gotta find the... Does everyone have the paperwork from Diane? Do we need a few minutes to maybe
Just a couple minutes.
read it?
Yep.
So the first page is actually the job description that we asked you for the part-time clerk.
Right. I'm not sure whether you determined that it's going to be a regular part-time job or it should be helping out, or I'm not sure if the wages should be.
Well, I would think what's presented here, I mean, I don't see a big problem with it, but it does mark out the responsibility, the job functions, what you'd be looking for somebody to do. Does it pretty much fit in with what Betty's doing for you now?
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Have you shown this to Betty to get any input from Betty on this? Is there any other comments on this as far as the job description, just to get away from the budget for a moment? Because we did give Diane some direction as to get this taken care of.
I have a quick question. Under baby qualifications, would you put in here required to pass background checks or anything like that? I mean, are they coming upon any secure information or any?
She's not.
She's not. Just everything is locked away and
Right.
and computers. I mean.
Right, she can't get into our incidents, she can't get into the evidence.
Okay.
room, she can't-
So if that's the case, then I guess that's not an issue.
It's not
Oh, that-
when we
This must treat me
agreed to have that clerk position for up to 6 hours, that was something that if this current situation stayed the way it was past May, that there was going to be that same ongoing need to have her do some of these tasks. Is that what you had in mind?
Up to 6 hours, and I did it $14 an hour at $6 an hour, 52 weeks. And that came up with the 4,300.
Was that, you didn't see that ending in May?
I really wasn't sure when it first came around, I wasn't sure if this was just a half hour, how we did the move from Chief Droney to myself, or we decided on a regular chief, or what we were doing, or if it was a permanent thing.
Well, let me
I
ask-
personally wasn't sure.
Let me ask you this, do you find having a clerical assistant helpful? And she's not working 6 hours to begin with.
No.
So the 3 hours or 4 hours every 2 weeks that she's working, is that helpful to your duties and freeing up your time?
No, the time is more kept up in incident reports, total report, the time is more taken up on doing chief things that she should be able to do. Going to MAC hearings.
So what you're saying is that you have her doing stuff that there's no value to.
Well, there's some value to it, but I can do it. I can learn how to do it. That's the function. It's just a chief's back in the chief's job. What she's doing is just taking as long as the other things. Most of my time is taken up by.
Right, and that, I guess that was the reason that we formed the position, is we know you only had a limited number of hours to do that.
I think if it went to more hours later on in the year, or whatever is going to happen.
Well, we have this police clerk position now, and it was brought to our attention that Betty wasn't appointed, so we did that. We did have a formal appointment, and we asked you to at least come up with a job description for her as long as we have her, so this is it. Is there other concerns on this job description for the position that Betty's doing now while you're at the hours?
David?
No.
Ron,
No, I have no further.
Paulette,
Look at what I see right now.
is there a motion to accept this document as the job description for that position?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Yes, good. There, that's out of the way. That was an effort well spent. All right. You want to walk us through the budget? Maybe you want to sit over here, then the finance committee can have a clear shot at you.
I did the chief's salaries. I really wasn't sure how many hours to put in for the chief's salaries, whether you're part-time or full-time, so I did kind of in between. I did 38 hours. At $25 an hour, came up to 49,400, which is a decrease by 12.07%. A difference of 6,782 from last year's. So that's where that came from.
Diane, my question is, what do you think the need is?
I think
The need, how many hours are needed for a police chief in town?
I think between 30 and 39, somewhere in there. 35.
35 hours, somewhere in that. And that's figuring how much patrol time?
I didn't figure out how much time. I'd say half a day, every day, at least, probably more. So probably about 6 hours of patrol time.
And clerical stuff and that sort of thing, would it average out to be 10, 12 hours a week?
Patrol time?
No, I mean, other than patrol time.
Yeah, Yeah.
12? Don't let me put numbers in your
Well,
head.
I'm not
just-
sure exactly, I guess I'm just being stupid here, I don't understand how many hours I expect to do patrol and how many hours there are.
I'm just saying, if you figured 38 hours,
Yeah.
would that give you 26 hours of patrol time? Or I'm trying to get an idea of how much time you'd be locked in the building downstairs compared to the amount of time you'd actually be out in town
Okay,
policing.
I would say 75% of that would be, well,
75%. Before she gets too far down the budget, do you want to ask questions now?
My concern is that last time we visited this police budget, we were talking about the chief position, or the acting chief, putting in about 32 hours a week, with reserve officers representing 28 hours of service per week, for a total of 60 hours per week. And this particular version of the budget now shows, without rate increases to be sure, but there are more hours being proposed. 38 hours of service by the acting chief, and 31 hours by the reserve officers, for a total of 69 hours of service. Plus, we now have an augmentation of the chief's work with a department clerk. And my concern is, particularly in light of these other expenses that are starting to kind of pinch us from vocational ed and other sources, that we move the chief's compensation, the acting chief's compensation, from last time we visited, it was $41,600, it's now $49,400. And the total police department expenses have gone from some, about 40,000, I think we came to, up to $48,000. So, again, it's not in and of itself a budget buster, but there's more expense that's kind of working its way into the police department here. And I just question, under our circumstances, whether we need that.
I think,
This is the issue.
I think that has to do with my inexperience of doing a budget. The first one, I put it together as best I could,
Right.
what I thought I was doing. And when I did this one, I did more calculating, I did more thought into it, and I put, I had room more support. Not that I didn't have before, but I thought I had a grip on it, and I didn't think I learned from it.
And we knew that at the time.
Right,
We talked
right.
about you're coming back with a refined budget and so on.
Yeah.
So we had some anticipation of that. I'm just concerned that there's enough more here that I'm a bit cautious on.
Okay.
That's all.
I think, Ted, the point you bring up is excellent, and I think it's exactly the point we were at 3 months ago when we made Diane acting chief, is that going through this budget process, we would have a better idea of what we need. Because I think there was a certain amount of consensus, we had more than we needed.
Yeah.
And so we can have a better idea of what the actual need is. And also, we've got to find that level that we can afford. This long discussion on the vocational school and what that does to the budget, we need to modify this. And I've had this discussion with Diane, even though it was only a couple hours ago, is that we're going to have to find a medium that hopefully can work and what we need. I mean, do we really need a full-time chief? To get into, from what I'm hearing, I don't see that there's a lot of push for a full-time chief. But
If
we've
you
got to
look
come up
at, if you look at 38 hours a week, you're virtually at a 40-hour-a-week kind of position, which a former chief had as a full-time chief. So I'm wondering, does this, in a de facto way, say that what we're opting for is a full-time chief position, albeit at a lower salary?
See, I'm using this document as a jumping off spot to have a discussion about where we need to be and what we can afford.
Yeah. I'm happy for a jumping off spot with more analysis and all that, but I just am concerned that this has kind of a de facto aspect to it. We're here, but for 2 hours of service a week to make it a really full-blown, full-time position. And I'm not myself convinced that that's what the town needs. It's not for me, of course, to say by myself, but I'm just thinking we've got some options that we talked about. Part-time chief, full-time chief, full-time academy qualified, possibly even a shared position with another town, although that is maybe a less likely option, but it feels to me like we're backing into something that if we go far enough, we're all but done with choice. And I just feel a little bit mousetrapped by that, I guess.
Oh, and I understand.
Yeah.
But we gotta have something to start with that maybe sounds rational. I mean, we can carve this up any number of ways, just like we do so many others.
Right, I understand.
When we first set this up in January, I thought I recalled we had proposed up to 30 hours, because you have another job that you're doing, and you didn't want to, I remember being concerned not to impact that too heavily. And that's where the up to 6 hours for clerk to help with some of the paperwork to alleviate some of that. So I was a little surprised to see 38 hours on this document.
That, we started at, I think, 35, I think, 36 hours. And we brought it down because of my other job. If, in the next fiscal year, I may not have that other job.
I mean, the fact of the matter is that at some point, to steal David Newell's line earlier, somebody's going to have to fish or cut bait, because she's not going to be able to keep up these 2 lives that she has at this point.
Diane, I wasn't at this meeting, probably the first budget meeting we had on February 3rd, but I have a former worksheet that shows 32 hours. Why go to the 38? Did something happen between now and...
No, but I feel that to keep up with everything, I think a 38-hour position is required. I mean, if you're going to have a chief and have do everything, I mean, the clerk doesn't necessarily have to be there if the chief can handle it all in 38 hours.
So this is just from
I had,
more experience that you felt that to get the job done appropriately, it needed an extra 6 hours.
Yeah.
That's just one difference. And then you did the same with the reserve.
we had talked about adding the two new officers for a Saturday shift and a day shift and a Sunday day shift, and that's where that comes from.
28 to 31 hours came from.
So-
Because in this
so
one,
the
it said
in-
28.
The increase in the chief's salary, and there's also an increase in the reserve wages. It seems like there should be a converse relationship there. And that's something that can be worked on to make that. But you understand where my thought
Yeah.
process just
Yeah.
went there is if the chief hours increase, the reserve officers should decrease.
And also included in the reserve officer increase is 1,360 for the fall festival.
That's included in the reserve.
Yeah,
What's that number, 1,000 what?
$1,360. That's $17 an hour, 16 hours for 5 officers.
Are the 2 rates of $25 an hour and $17 an hour, are they the current rate plus 2% to keep it in sync with all the rest of the employees?
Yeah. I don't know about the 25, we came up with that number.
You and Mary came up with that.
But
It's a good point to jump off from.
is that a concern that the rest of the employees are getting 2% and whatever it is now plus 2% would be a better figure to use just to keep all things in harmony? in the same treatment of pushing
Well, 2% would be 2448.
proposed that we should probably be using the same 2% for all employees, and whatever the hourly rate is right now for patrol officers plus 2%, that's 17 fine. If it isn't, I think we just need to treat them all the
It's
same.
16 something now, right?
Now,
It's
it goes
16,
up to 17.
1670, is that right? And then the 30 cents brings it up
Just
to,
17. So the 24, would be 24.48 or something like that instead of the 25 to keep 2%, the same as
I'm
everybody
not
else.
sure why we bring it down to 24.
well, you're getting 24 now.
We need 20.
For, aren't you?
Oh, yes, that's right, we did, I'm sorry, that's, you're right.
I'm just trying to keep everything the same in terms of percentage equitable to everybody, that's all.
Ted, did you get in Diane the discussion, I know you and Janet were having a little powwow,
So,
that $1,360 in that reserve wages is built right in for Fall Festival, so that's not a question if that's covered or not?
I did get that, thank you.
no, I'm just,
I paid attention for
You
them.
paid attention and passed it to me, but I
Good
forgot.
job.
somehow didn't get down to the
Sorry.
That one minute you're not on 100% is when we go somewhere that, I mean, that's just a point of information to go with.
I'll give you lots of opportunities to outdistance me in this matter of attention. So you're telling me that what, community policing is zero now?
No, under reserve wages.
Yes.
Part of that increase, or
Yes.
part of that number, the 28,760,
Yes.
in that is included $1,360 for coverage on Fall Festival, which in the past has always been a contention, is it public or private, who should pay for it?
Yeah,
But that's included in this budget.
I see it. Okay.
So the community policing is still,
But the community policing also then needs to be a line item?
Community policing is for material that we would need to do things with the children, like having a bike rodeo, having a bike parade, the safety day up at the school. One handout for the kids that I found today would cost $224 to get enough for all the kids. Just one handout.
See, community policing, I guess, is what I call outreach.
Yeah.
And so, have you done any of that? We haven't had $1,000 for that in the budget before.
No,
So that is actually, as it's shown, brand new.
Brandon.
We've got along without it in the past.
It may make up in printer ink because I make out the flyers by hand on the printer, so uses quite a bit of printer.
So under materials, Ann and Lynn don't let you take paper and stuff out of the office anymore? They slap your hand when you come up? Or?
I have some paper downstairs and I've come up and got paper upstairs.
I'm
It's the
I'm looking for the increase.
The printer ink, the cartridges.
Okay.
Before, last year we had it through the girls upstairs, that I asked for it, they did it, wasn't billed for the police department. Now it's up in the air whether it's going to be done the same way this year. And if it's not, we need to include it.
So does she have totally different ink cartridges than the rest of the building, or we're just trying to
I
keep
think
it?
they're all different printers, I think. And I think part of the issue is that we don't really know what other departments need or want to build it in.
Trying to have a true account. And this is the best guess. Yes. dues, 142% increase in dues. What are we belonging to? That we have,
Mass Police Chiefs, Western Mass Police Chiefs, Franklin County Police Chiefs. I believe I've done away with the Mass Police Chiefs. That was a little much. I chose to just stay with the Franklin County Police Chiefs and the Western Mass Police Chiefs. That could be tweaked a little bit.
You've done away with the Massachusetts?
I didn't redo I can't think of the word.
Membership.
Membership, thank you.
But isn't that around $750 a year? I thought that was a price quoted to us one time,
I believe it was about that much.
something like that. So does that suggest that you could take the dues down by
500?
500 or so? What's the consequence of not belonging to the Massachusetts Police Chiefs Association?
I talked to Chief Droney about it because there were so many different ones, and I was thinking it was repeating itself because there's so many. He said that we could do without that one. I didn't ask for a reason. I just was asking if we really needed all of them.
Because that's my impression, that they're kind of tiers of these associations, many of which I think are a bit replicative of one
Yep.
another.
Yes.
And so I think to stay with the local ones probably is the more sensible choice in this
Absolutely.
instance, and I applaud you for that. I want to go back one more time, though, to the chief and the clerk in combination. I had the impression earlier on that the chief's hours at what was originally estimated 32, now it's 38, plus there's 6 hours per week of clerk's wages provided for here. And I rather thought that the combination of the chief and the clerk would be able to handle the administrative role, giving the chief's position more chance to be out on patrol in the community and so forth. But if you combine those two, it's gone from, say, 38 on the part of the chief plus 6 a week on average to a total of 44 hours a week of work. And I just worry that this is getting a bit inflated to the point where we're creating a position in an effort to, is this to replace the 2 positions that Diane fulfills now, one here and one elsewhere, or where are we going?
Well, at some point, we're going to have to make a decision on,
Yeah.
regardless if it's Diane or not,
Right.
somebody's going to have this position to make a living.
Okay.
And not be spread out quite so thin. I'm not saying that money can't be saved,
Right.
but I think we need to have that type of discussion about where we want to go with this. What we're doing right now, although it's been great, and it's been a great transition,
Yeah.
it's not going to be a long-standing situation.
So this is a temporary arrangement.
What we have right now,
It's temporary.
through the end of June, is a
Yeah.
temporary arrangement.
Right.
And how much longer that can be extended beyond that is probably minimal
Yeah.
to extend this particular position with this particular person.
Right.
That's why I say it's important for us to figure out what our real needs are and what we can afford.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the perfect opportunity for us to be thinking about what we can afford. I mean, if what we need long-term is a 24-hour part-time chief,
Yeah.
you know, we'll probably have to really start looking for that. But it was kind of premature to go that route until we had this discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense to everyone?
Well, not to beat a dead horse here, but if, for example, Diane, as of June 30th, found a position that she really wanted, different from what she's now doing for us, and had to leave. What we're budgeting here is a 38-hour position, nearly 40 hours, that would pay $49,000, where when we hired our last chief, the full-time chief, Chief Droney, there was quite a bit of concern that we didn't have enough money in the coffers to pay a real honest-to-goodness full-time chief. And so it looks to me like we're setting ourselves up to say we've got virtually a full-time position for which we're willing to pay only $50,000, $49,000. Whereas the prior chief, 40 hours a week, got $56,000. And so if we really want a full-time chief, we either have to up the ante and say, well, we need a 38-hour-a-week person. So that's going to cost us $56,000, $60,000. Or we're not sure what we need here. This has to be more of a part-time position, which we pay less, recognizing it's only a part-time position. And I think we're kind of straddling two choices here, but leaning pretty heavily toward this is a full-time role here that we see ourselves in. Notwithstanding the fact that you've got a clerk that can help with some administrative role in the office. To me, it gives kind of a confusing set of signals. That's my concern.
I think it's a confusing situation to be in, Ted.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you feel, knowing what we know today, would be your recommendation off the cuff of what police should cost in the town of Ashfield?
I think that would be really hard to answer, not knowing what we actually do and how many calls go to the state.
Right.
There's part of this decision that needs to be made on what we can afford.
Less hours, if you do less patrolling on the part of the chief, to make that back down towards 32.
How many hours did we have budget for the police last year, total?
Well, you had 240 plus the reserve officer. Well, you had the
Oh, your
corporal.
salary, right?
Right. You had 56,000 for the salary, 45,000 for the department,
Right, but how many
and
hours?
5,000 for fuel.
The chief,
How many hours total?
chief was
We
40,
had 40.
and then I think the reserve officers were in for 30-something, so we had about 77 hours of coverage, as I recall, all up. And then
At the final budget, the 77 hours sounds right because it got modified from 80,
yeah,
right? That's what the discussion on the floor was that cut the last $5,000 out or
I
whatever
think
it
we
was.
finance committee members were a little of the mind that we didn't need a full 80, we kind of backed it down to 77. Not a huge difference, but we thought something like that, wasn't it? Or 74 from 77, something of that order, to save a bit of money.
Well, is there any way to put a question on the ballot, like a poll question, to ask the citizens to vote on what they would prefer to have? Or versus having a discussion on the floor of the town hall?
Ballots off being printed, right?
The
So that's-
ballots have already come.
so that's
They've been
gone.
printed and they're back.
But you
They're
can,
printed and back already? God, there's few things that happen that fast.
or you could still have something on the town floor.
We could print something up to go with the ballots, right? No?
I mean, that was a lot of discussion when we hired the last chief. And as soon as the town made the decision to go to a full-time chief, there was constant consternation that we didn't need one.
It seemed on the first draft that you did the 32 hours for the chief and 28 for the reserve, and you felt that 60 hours, as long as it was alternating, would be plenty of coverage for the size of our town.
I don't think that's what we determined the 32 hours on. We determined the 32 hours on how much I could put into the job.
Right. How much was it?
We didn't determine it by how much time.
And
we
that
needed.
was the reason for making that clerk's position.
Right.
So where does it stand right now, Diane, if I might ask, in terms of the hours you put in per week? What are you currently putting in?
30.
30.
Mhm.
And how does that seem to you? Are you being augmented by a clerk now on a part-time basis?
She's doing the warrant and payroll, the warrants and payroll.
Okay. And that's what, a couple hours a week?
Yeah.
Maybe, something like that.
3, 2, 3.
Is there enough work for her to do 6 hours of work a week?
Honestly, no.
Order your stuff.
Pardon?
Honestly, no.
Honestly, no.
What about the gun renewals and stuff like that?
I'm sorry, what?
The permit renewals?
That's totally different than the
It's
clerk's
not-
That's
position.
a whole nother,
Well, one thing you could do, what's the consequence of taking the clerk's dollar amount here and adjusting that instead of 6 hours a week, what if that were 4 hours a week or 3 hours a week? Does that do violence to what you need done?
No.
You can manage with that.
Yeah,
Is that,
if the position went to 38 or to where I was putting in more hours, if I happened to be the one putting in more hours, I don't think we'd need the clerk at all.
yeah, $14 compared to $25 an hour.
See, what I'm thinking in this discussion right now
yeah,
is the chief,
yeah,
and Diane certainly may not agree with me, but that's all right. I'm thinking 35 hours at $24.48. That changes that by $5,000, takes it to $44,553.
yeah.
Eliminate, if you went to 35 hours, eliminate the clerk's position.
Yeah,
So there's $9,000 swept away.
hold on. What would happen if that took place? How would fiscal year 2015 look to you then? Assuming you continue on in your role.
I don't think that's enough. Assuming I continue on my role, I wouldn't be continuing on my role.
Because of,
I can't live on 35 hours.
you need more service than that.
Mhm.
Is she talking about her person?
That's your situation.
Right, that's what you want.
Could the department, let's suppose we set that aside. If you did continue on those terms, could the department continue to work effectively?
I think realistically, I don't think so. I think you need more hours.
More hours by the chief or with a clerk?
Well, if you had more hours by the chief.
By the chief. 38 would do it?
I feel it would.
On your 30 hours a week, how much is spent patrolling? And
I don't write down the hours in the patrol car, but I usually do an hour in the station, 2 hours out, kind of alternating. Come in for an hour or so, go back out.
so about a third of the time is
Yeah.
in the office.
Yeah.
So you're able to get all the office.
Right. And it
Clerical.
doesn't include going to court and all of that. So that's what the clerk can't do, is go to court. She can't enter incidents. She can't.
So then I'm hearing that it basically takes 10 hours a week plus court time that the chief has to do.
At least, yeah.
And then the rest of it's kind of patrolling, whether it could be you
Right,
or somebody else.
right.
Now, let me try one more tack. If instead of 35 hours at $24.48 an hour, what if it was 35 hours at a higher rate? Is it the hours that are critical, or is it the ultimate
The ultimate,
income?
the income.
But
Well, are you trying to go down just working here? I'm confused.
Well, I'm saying,
I'm not
to
sure I'm
Pauline's point earlier, the $24.48 comes from taking the $24 current rate that the acting chief is paid and increasing it by 2%. So instead of the $25 that's represented here, suppose it were the $24.48, that's a 2% increase. Another way to take this is to say if 35 hours is sufficient in time commitment to achieve the work of the chief or acting chief, another way to tackle this would be say, we could, or somebody could, the select board, I guess, would have to do it, we make a recommendation for or against, to go to a higher rate, simply say, we intend at this point to pay a higher rate to the acting chief in order to secure services of 35 hours on an ongoing basis in the new fiscal year. Now, you kind of moved the mark in doing that.
That's amusing. I'm sorry. Why would we adjust the rate to be different? Just give her more hours. The net's the same.
Yes, right.
It-
But
It's
I'm hearing,
to keep the 2% the same, I mean, for everybody.
Yeah, I understand. That's another way to do it. You can do it.
My question is the chief's salary at $25 an hour, is that a lower salary than a real actual chief salary? Yes.
That-
Well, remember, you had a 40-hour chief last year.
Well, I know, because she's not certified as a chief. She
There's
doesn't
not
have,
really any certification.
I thought you had to go to some type of.
Do not
academy.
have to if you're part-time. Only time you have to is if you do 40 hours or
There's
more.
full-time academy and part-time academy, part-time reserve. The way we have her as acting chief right now, it's part-time because she was completing part-time reserve academy.
There is a chief in Franklin County that he works 40 hours. He's never been through the full-time academy. He works 20 hours administrative and the other 20 hours on patrol. That's how he gets.
But I think it's a little different. He has 20 hours administrative and 20 hours as chief, right?
He said, when I talked to him, he said 20 hours doing admin work.
Yeah. I think that admin work is like clerk work, because it's a different job classification than chief work. That's how he gets around the full-time 40-hour job. I know who you're speaking about there. But it sounds like it's coming down to a working wage, that's what this whole issue is. It sounds like Diane's saying she needs to make $49,500 to be able to make this work. And I guess that's what we're facing, and if it's not, then we're going to be facing it with another candidate working as a chief for 2 towns,
Probably
or
asking for a lot of
something
money
very different, you know.
in the whole process.
So I think that's trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, or the other way around. I think this is what we're looking at.
But are we concentrating too much on the person versus the position? And is that, I mean, maybe that's what we want to do, but, you know, we...
That is
They
the
help us
ultimate,
out.
that is the ultimate thing to decide on what we're going to fund.
Because some of what I hear is we've fallen in love with Chief Wilder, we're trying to make these numbers work for her. You know, is that where we want to be?
Well, we're definitely appreciative of her stepping in when she's going away.
And this might be something that works for us in the long run too, right? I mean, it might be.
Well, we had a whole committee and a whole years of, wasn't it at least a year of people planning how the next person was going to do for the town?
It was a full-time chief, that was what they ended up with, right?
And,
And before that,
But-
it was
But
decided
then
not
we
to.
had a police budget last year that the police chief presented a budget which was, I believe, 86 hours of coverage. The select board cut it to 80. And the finance committee presented it to town meeting at 77. And there was really no discussion about cutting the police budget. The only discussion was, who else can we give that money to? Do you remember that as vividly as I do?
I believe we were
I
trying to get
was
discussion.
astounded
Yeah.
that there wasn't any real discussion about carving back that police budget.
But this is, Tom, this is 69, right? So it's going from 70, whatever, you said, finance committee, down to 31 and 38, right? 69.
Yeah,
Well,
10% decrease.
but that's for
well, you got the clerk at 6
reserve
hours,
and the salary.
Oh, okay.
You add the
You're
6.
right.
so you got 75.
Well, it sounds like we don't need the clerk for 6 hours.
Yeah, you could probably scale that back to 3.
Oh, I really believe that, just like Diane said, if you had somebody in the chief's position for extra hours, that clerk's position could disappear.
I'm confused. When we had the chief, Diane was doing a lot of the paperwork. And the whole reason we got the clerk is because when Diane was going to be the interim
Chief,
We need
somebody
to do the
needed to be
paperwork.
doing the paperwork.
Well, maybe
Yeah,
Diane's
that's
just,
because she was
So where are we?
30
she's just a
hours.
little bit too efficient on all the paperwork and she's just getting it
She was working
done.
30 hours
It was
a
the-
week though. back
Yes, you're right.
It was the warrant and the billing that I was concerned with.
yeah.
And I kind of thought having someone help until I could learn it, instead of learning all of the position, dumped on all at once, I thought it would help.
So going forward in this coming year, if you're in the role of the acting chief, how many hours of the police department clerk can you usefully employ on an average per week?
Well, it would depend if the hours went up to the police chief.
Irrespective of what the chief's hours are. I mean,
I'd
to
say
employ
3.
somebody usefully.
3.
3? So I would suggest you take the police clerk wages at $43.68 and cut them in half. And they've got 3 hours a week. That's a start. Does that seem reasonable?
What she was saying, though, if they're here 38 hours a week, she could pretty much do it all.
Is that true?
That's why she was tying it to, she's currently at 30, she needed help with a clerk for 6. But if she goes to 38, you don't need any help.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
And plus, since I've been in the job, I'm getting more comfortable with the job, and I'm not so concerned about taking on more things like the payroll and the warrant.
But you wearing so many different hats in our little town kind of has me worried.
Yeah, I'm hoping it'll be only
I
one
mean,
hat.
payroll, clerk, I mean,
Well, that, the
Well, that's
chief,
what the
the chief-
acting chief was supposed to be doing
Right.
before.
Yeah, all department heads do that effectively. Handle that kind of stuff, it seems to me. That doesn't strike me as unusual.
So, and we are planning this for the next fiscal year, which is starting July 1st. And I feel like we're really tailoring this to fit you more than a general budget. That means you're planning
I
on
don't know what else
sticking.
to judge, put it on.
Really?
You know, I don't know whether it's gonna be full-time or part-time, and I don't know whether it's gonna be,
We need to get some direction.
Yeah, because
We need, as a group, the 6 of us, to put some thought to this and give serious direction to
what
where,
the town needs.
what we need, what we can afford, and make it fit in the box, and then with or without Diane Wilder, try to come up with a solution. I'm just re-adding these numbers because I'm feeling like there's a problem, but there may not be.
I don't know, I don't think the 6 hours a week for the clerk is too much to use, then that would free the acting chief or anybody else to go do more community outreach and patrolling. Like, you know, sitting in the desk doing this paperwork, shuffling, I think the town could benefit so much more by having a clerk doing it than you. I mean, I want you out there. I want the community to know that there's somebody out there not sitting behind a desk. When that patrol car is sitting out there in front of the town hall, it's like, okay, where's our police? They're in here shuffling paperwork. Let's have a clerk in here doing it.
That's right.
My opinion.
Well, and if the chief is out there that much, we might be able to cut back on some of the reserve, hours.
the reserve hours are just doing a Friday night shift, which I think is important. Saturday day and Saturday night during the summer especially, I think is important. And then the Sunday for the motorcycle during the summer.
I think,
Just summer.
I think the reserve hours are important too. I mean,
And that
from
gives
the
you
first
adequate
draft,
coverage with the reserve officers, that's,
I'm sorry.
those 31 hours per week.
That was based on 52 weeks a year. I wasn't sure how long to base it on.
But if some of these are seasonal, does that mean you could effectively pare that back a bit?
I could pare it back in the winter time.
probably
Yeah.
get paired in winter time, increase it during the higher times when we have things going on in town. I mean, it only, from the first draft to the second draft, it went up 2 hours.
I could have made a mistake, but I think if you add that column on fiscal 14 budget, that total at the bottom is off by about $30,000. It doesn't add up to 138, it adds up to 106.
Oh.
106, 217, something got doubled there.
Look at that. Even though Julie
So the difference,
kept
the difference in this budget from last year's budget is only about $5,000.
less.
I haven't added up both columns, but I know that one's off to begin with.
That's what, because the computer did the adding on by itself. I guess we can't rely on those things.
Would you have
Well,
to
you're right,
throw
if the formula's off, I came up with 106, 217, and I'm not telling you that at 9:30 at night I couldn't have pushed the wrong number, but I'm pretty close to it.
No,
If you add
I
these
came up
three-
with the same number, and I came up with the 103, 132.
If you add the, right after the budget for 14, 56, 45, and 5, it's at 106.
So if we were looking at hours of coverage, right, if you just figured that, you're down to 65 hours.
65 hours worth.
Right, if you had, if you just assumed that 38 hours for the chief and 17 hours,
Where's the 17 come from?
well, it says 17, oh, I'm sorry, 31, I'm sorry. I was thinking $17 an hour.
It's
I'm sorry.
69.
Over last year, right? If you don't add in the clerk.
69 hours of coverage is less coverage than we had last year.
Right.
We had 40 hours for the chief and 30-something, 37, was it, for reserves?
No.
So we've got less coverage here, but now we've got a clerk in there that I'm hearing
I think-
Diane suggest is perhaps unnecessary. In fact, if she's going to undertake that kind of administrative work as well, in the course of her hours of service.
With the coverage, I think where it comes down is you don't have two officers in the station during the day.
Right.
So I think that's where it leveled out and gave you more coverage on the weekend,
Correct.
where it's more needed.
Right, and pulled apart that overlap that we
Right,
have been
absolutely.
gathered times. And that's very helpful. That's very smart. And two officers in such an array can work. That is, you're not left with too few officers available.
No, I'm not. I'm sitting pretty good with the two extra officers now.
Yeah, it's not 24-hour coverage, of course, but
No,
that's not what we can afford.
right. And that was another thing, incorporated into those hours is whether or not you want a chief that would be on call in the overnights. Something to think about.
So the 69 hours of coverage that we have now is actually more coverage than we were paying for with the 77 hours because we don't have any overlap during the day.
Absolutely.
We don't, well, do we have
Of
69
patrol,
hours of coverage?
of patrol, because we had a chief for 40 hours and then you were working,
I was working anywhere from 20 to 29, 30 hours.
So if you just called it 25 hours, there was 25 hours of overlap there. The chief was pretty much on duty all year hours.
So how does
So
this,
you had 77 minus 25 for 52 total hours of the week being covered.
And how
So
does-
I'm not exactly sure at this hour how to calculate that, but there's an efficiency quotient there somewhere.
What's more hours of blanket coverage or something like that? Less redundant.
That was, right, there's no, because you're only, I mean, right now with the reserve officers, you only see them, each one of them maybe an hour a week, give them their assignments. And,
if I even see him that, we do most of our talking through texts and phone.
okay.
Jerry Knopko, I usually don't see him. Mattson, I see more. Mattson is doing a few hours up to the school during the week, so you will see two on, but he's supposed to be working at the school, which is going really well. I hear.
So we give that,
Probably 25%.
Paula, what are your thoughts?
I'm still concerned because we have a 40-hour chief, and we still had Diane there for quite a few hours doing some task. Yet chief was working. So something's getting lost in here, and I just also want to be careful that it doesn't end up as all a burden on your shoulders if the clerk goes entirely.
I don't think-
Well, I wonder if we, well, I agree. I mean, we have to look at that carefully. But I think that's a pretty interesting point that for whatever reason we just tripped upon, is that we don't have that overlap. That we were paying for 77 and we're probably only getting 55 hours of real coverage. And this is really looking like 68 hours of coverage, which effectively might be 65 hours. Right? Because you gotta have some overlap with
Shift change.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
3 hours, you know.
They don't overlap like that. One comes in at 5, and one, Mattson comes in at 5, and the evening works till 11. Jerry, right now, there's nobody that, I'm working the day shift, I'm out of here by 12 or 1 o'clock, so I won't necessarily see him. Saturdays, Canopco comes in at 5 o'clock and works till 11. So, when we have enough officers, so Saturday we'll have a day shift and a night shift. My day shift is gonna work, not necessarily to 5, but to get 6 hours from, anywhere from 8 to 5. He's got 6 hours to work. We get to put it down and write, put it firmly down that what hours we'll be working, but it'll be 6 hours between them. We don't necessarily overlap.
Sometimes it's good not to have it exactly right? You wanna mix things up a little bit.
Yeah. If I got a bicycle tour coming through or something, I can have him change his hours a little bit, change them a little bit here and
And some of your daytime hours you spent in court too, aren't they?
there. Yes. I spent, I can't remember what day it was. It was when Chief Joni was here, but I was in court from 2 o'clock until 5. We had to ask the janitor to let us out. The doors were locked
At the courthouse.
at the courthouse. Yeah.
So,
Well, there are a couple things that I think have transpired here in my mind. One is, I'm hearing that the clerk, job responsibilities for which the select board just approved, is a lot less necessary than we thought. But that 2 hours a week might be a reasonable assessment of some kind of administrative support that maybe should be retained in the budget. But if you deduct 2/3 of the 4368, you save about $3,000. And so the total for that whole column for fiscal year 15 becomes $100,205. Furthermore, if we go back up and have a 38-hour job, 52 weeks times the new 24.48 rate. That becomes $48,372 instead of the $49,400. Now, that honors the idea of going up in salary by only 2% like other employees. It means somewhat less income for the acting chief. It preserves the 38 hours that's been budgeted here on the theory that that kind of coverage and oversight is still valuable to us. And it technically, I guess, causes her to be classified as a part-time chief. Is that true?
Yes.
Only about 2 hours under the bar. So you accomplish a number of things there. And if it's furthermore understood that this is, for the time being, the arrangement as projected forward, I guess the question is twofold in my mind. Does that preserve Diane's interest in the job should it have to be renewed coming into June? And secondly, does that then still leave us with enough latitude to do further discussion about what this police department is going to look like in terms of a chief? Whether full-time, part-time, shared, or something else?
Well, you know, one of the big points is the idea of a shared chief.
Yep.
And although you can speak to individuals in other towns that they might be pretty interested, others aren't. You know, it's very much the same as our situation, where it would be kind of hard to find unanimity. And a shared position would have to be a relatively long-term process. I'm all for looking into it and see if we could come up with something, but it would be much like getting into an agreement with another regional school.
I know, and that's dicey.
I like what you said, Ted. My only concern is finding somebody who would be able to get anything done at 2 hours a week.
Well, that's all the clerks working now. She's not even. I think the last warrant I saw, she had 3 hours in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's the issue. I don't know that there's enough job there to warrant a budgeting of 6 hours a week. It's conceivable in future that would change. It's also a function of how much Diane as acting chief delegates to that person. If she delegates nothing, then that's a budget line that sits there kind of underutilized, if you want to think of it that way.
I would think it'd be.
But the advantage of her utilizing this delegation is that gives somebody like an acting chief here more time to be engaged in what you and I think, right or wrong, call real police work, and not just so much,
I
filing
think-
and stuff.
Delegate is a good word to describe. I was sitting here trying to decide how to describe why I was doing so much
Yeah.
extra. And it was delegated to me. Not necessarily that there was not enough time in the day for the chief. That's saying it politically correct.
Well, would you feel comfortable delegating some of this?
There's some of it there's not really that much to delegate. I mean, she can't do my incidents for me.
No,
She can't go to court for me.
no.
She can't
But what can she do?
warrants and payroll.
She did,
There's a value
she
you
did some letters for you
Oh, yeah,
and that
she's
sort of
letters.
thing.
Yeah, she's
I
done
mean, all
letters
the
and
stuff that's
mailings.
on here, right? All these essential job functions. Monthly budget report.
I mean, warrants and payroll, to me, those are something supervisors should do. I really think so. You're supposed to look at timesheets and fill out expense forms and approve stuff, because that's how you know how efficiently people are working and where they're working and when they're working. So, personally, I don't see that being something that she would do. But if there was something else that you had that you could delegate for that 2 hours, that'd be great.
Well, I noticed that Diane reviews all those timesheets when they're all put together,
Okay.
and she signs them. It's not that she never sees them,
Okay.
but as far as taking the 4 or 5 reserve officers and putting their time together. That's what I see when we sign the warrant, is that those timesheets are put together.
Entered into the computer and all that stuff.
Scheduling, she can't really do that because I know where they need to go. I know what.
Yeah, it says special event coordination, volunteer coordination, performing transcriptions.
Seeing that it's 9:45,
Yeah.
9:45, is there a member of the finance committee that in the next week would join me one afternoon, one morning, one part of any of those, to sit with the chief and really tear this budget apart and kind of figure out what the bare bones are?
Well, I've been talking a lot. I guess I'd be willing to sign up for that.
You think it's really necessary? I think she's done a good job with this, and we've kind of torn it apart ourselves.
Well, they gotta do final hiring.
Well, in a couple of the items, we asked her to add a little more money on because she was bringing on 2 more officers.
Right.
And I think it was, maybe it'd been equipment and ammunition, if I'm not
I think it was
mistaken.
training and, was it equipment? I can't remember now. I added for the ammo to the cost.
Right.
But you're right, the last budget meeting we had it.
Two.
Oh, yes.
Because there's two more people coming up.
Right.
You want to keep the clerk? Keep it. Keep it. In some ways, I would argue that caucusing for just a moment.
That's fine.
Is that all right?
It's fine, knock yourself out.
Don't video it to home.
Gotta do something about this. In some ways, it strikes me that would be a
There was
skill.
an article on the internet that if you switch your print font to Garmin,
Yeah, I saw that.
you would save ink.
About 2 hours.
It has to do with the size of the letters in the,
See, mine was
is
famous.
it Garamond?
I don't know what it was.
Font, and it was most interesting, yeah. I said, wow, that's a lot of ink.
Yeah.
It's not a bad font.
No, it really was a
It was like
significant.
24% or something.
Yeah.
Close to it.
Think about that someplace where they have hundreds of printers.
Well, they were, I think it was like a 14-year-old student who was applying it to the federal government, all this stuff.
Yeah, it's like the global economy.
That just switch your font and say, just on the cost of ink.
I was in DC this weekend and walking around, you go by a building and says internal revenue. I said, oh, that's where the internal revenue is. And then it's huge. And then, but then you walk back a block and there's 4 more buildings that are internal revenue.
Oh, really?
And then we got over into Alexandria, Virginia, and there's 3 or 4 buildings marked. And I said, oh gosh, we haven't even got to Cincinnati where Lois Lerner was yet. I'm just walking around. But the biggest was the 2 original buildings for the Department of Education.
I was going to say,
Those are the biggest,
yeah.
the most, and I think they were the first ones built.
Long day.
Yeah, there's a position.
So,
Wait.
Oh.
If you're okay with that. Put this to,
So we went, it rained on Saturday, and we went to the American History Museum. I think a person, if they were there for a week, could stay in that one museum and probably not be able to see it all. If you read it the way I read every plaque and every, yes, I don't know if I could do it in 5 8-hour days, and I don't think anybody could stand to do it for 8 hours a day. But on Friday, we had a fantastic tour of the Capitol. Fantastic.
Guided?
The guide makes it, right? The doser is the guy that...
With the little earphones.
Oh, he put the little earphones on, and boy, I didn't see quite as much of it as I wanted, but I got all the information I could stand, I guess.
This was about 15 years ago, when we were in DC, and Kurt had this new big long telephone lens, and we were near the Lincoln Center, and I could look across to the White House. So he's looking through his lens. And he goes, they're looking back.
Yeah, is that right?
They weren't just looking in the direction, they were looking back and said, oh God, we're not doing anything wrong, but we're gonna get out of here. Because he said they're pointing. And you can see him looking through the lens.
Caucus as a finance committee, we have the view at this point that if you go back to the top, 38 hours for the acting chief doesn't seem to us unreasonable. We actually go back to the idea of a $25 per hour rate and wonder if that isn't appropriate, given the fact that instead of just a 2% increase, a somewhat greater amount, keeping the total salary line at $49,400 would make some sense, provided that's offset by a reduction of 2/3 of the clerk's wages down below, so that you have a $14 an hour rate at 2 hours per week, not 6 hours a week. And that would be about a $3,000 savings, so that your total budget down at the bottom would be more like $100,200 or so. And that's about a 6% reduction, maybe 7% reduction from the year before. I think it takes into account a willingness to put in more patrol time, and it would be our expectation that this would lead to more patrol time to the extent that some delegation was handled inside the department to see to it that that kind of paperwork and filing was done by a clerk. To eliminate the clerk entirely, I think, is maybe a mistake, because having a clerk usefully employed, I think, leverages the time of the acting chief to be out and about doing things. I think it's important to keep it a part-time, 38 hours and no more, because I don't think we've come to a conclusion as to what we need in the town as a full or part-time chief, and this technically remains a part-time position all the way a hair's breadth. And I think we have the consensus here that, if I speak properly for the committee, that a $25 an hour rate represents more than just a 2% increase. It's some acknowledgement of the experience that's been gained this period of time. And again, it's on the expectation that there's a renewal in the works in the event that the select board goes that direction. If our acting chief should leave at the end of June, then I think we're back at the question of exactly what kind of terms you're going to have to attract somebody new. Going back to the beginning, if you like, from a recruiting process, I think is likely to lead us into a much higher salary range if we decide to go for a full-time chief. If it's a part-time chief, I think we're back down into the 30 to 35 to so many hours a week of some sort. It may be something that would be comparable to $49,000, $50,000, but I guess our projection at this point is that that's a reasonable amount of tweaking to do this budget, and some of it's going to have to just play out, see how it works. I mean, these are estimates. These are,
It's a budget.
It's a budget.
Did you take into consideration taking dues from 1,000 to 500?
No, but that's a great idea. Oh, I've actually written it in my. Yes, I have. So it's another saving of $500.
Which puts it down below 100,000
Yeah.
total budget.
99,720.
99,720 is what I come up with.
99,720.
Just so I have this number, last year, how many hours of coverage was the lowest? 70?
We were paying for 77. But the discussion is that probably effectively, since there was so much overlap,
Yeah.
that it was probably only 55. Am I understating that?
We were paying 77, right?
And getting 50-something.
I mean, there was 8 hours, there were 20 hours or 25 hours a week where there were 2 people on duty.
Well, last year, in all fairness to Chief, he was working on a lot of operating procedures and doing a lot of office work that I think that this year we don't have to do. So, you know, if it came to the town floor, I'm looking at Ted's 6% reduction in the budget. I'm looking at about 10% decrease in total hours, also from 77 to 71, just under 10%. So everything's moving in the right direction, but I think we still have an equitable position here. And effectively, more hours of coverage.
Of patrol.
Because if you were to say 55 hours, it's saying, well, wait, if we did fine with 55, why are we up to 71? But it's really not. It was a different job description back then. So it's more patrol time. I think that sounds pretty good.
Well, and to your point too, on this business of police policies and procedures, that was a long-standing issue that we hadn't really kind of cracked very effectively. It goes back to my brief time on the select board. And you could argue that the police department, like any other department I would think, but maybe police in particular, things change over time. What you need to have done can change. If you're in a relatively steady state now, which seems to be the case, this may be adequate coverage. If there develop problems of some kind, I could see us going back and saying, you know what, we need a full-time chief and we need another officer full-time. I mean, it's conceivable these circumstances would change.
Right.
And I think at our point right now, we're pressed pretty hard financially from what I can see. We've got some reserves to work from, but by the time we get done with those reserves, we're going to have almost nothing. And this is one of those instances where I think we have to keep pretty close to the bone if we're going to make this work. It may not be stable for long, I don't know.
Well, our good fortune last year is catching up with us. No good deed goes unpunished.
Right.
In part, we predicted that last year, though, that the more we were able to fine-tune the budget, the less free cash,
Yes.
and you work yourself into a situation where you're tight.
Paulette flagged that for us a number of times, saying, be careful, because you know what seems good now, as we get tighter on the budget, means that there's less excess at the end of any year, because that's where a lot of free cash comes from. But we didn't spend it all in the budget.
Most of it was coming from the vote in previous years.
Right.
The down population years.
Yeah. So I don't know if we even need a meeting.
Okay.
I don't know if that seems gas muster to you or not. Can we do a slightly different number?
Mary, I don't quite understand how to take these numbers that we're working with here and put them into this,
Yeah, and I can
to
do
understand.
that and send it out to you all by, I would say tomorrow.
This is what we want. I don't know what's here.
I'm sorry, do you mean in the,
The tweaks and stuff that we made on the proposed budget that she gave us. And I don't know how to fit that into all these numbers on the big.
right, so I'll be making those changes tomorrow, and I can send
Okay.
out to all of you tomorrow or Wednesday, depending on how the day goes.
That board now recommendation.
What I have right now is that if you are in accord with what we just offered up, that the chief's salary would stay at the $49,400 for fiscal year 15. That if you deduct $500 from the department dues, that is, take 500 away from 1,000, and you take away 2/3 of the department clerk wages, then your police department expense total becomes
You're talking about the big line at the bottom.
Yeah, no.
No, just the 4503, sorry, 48,532.
Yeah, it becomes 45,105. Sorry. And then you have police department fuel, 5,200.
But that's a separate line than some of the-
Yes.
Yeah.
But those are the three numbers that I think would go into the master budget sheet.
Yeah.
Which gives us, if we're just comparing totals,
It doesn't matter. The new numbers are higher than what's on the printed sheet.
Right.
So the grand total becomes 99,705.
yeah, 99.75. Okay, that's fine.
That would be our recommendations.
As, I know you guys stay up late at night thinking about this. Is there a number in your mind, thinking about this budget, that you'd like to retain in free cash at the end of annual town meeting? One other meeting had discussed that I would think 60,000 would be appropriate. I don't know how we'll ever end up there, but is there a number that we should try to shoot for? I mean, there's a lot of lines, and we're trying to plan on signing a warrant on the 21st.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely has to be signed by the 25th. One of the discussions we had last week, so that you're informed, is just so you know, another account that has available money in it that we don't normally discuss, but in an effort for full disclosure, is excess overlay. An excess overlay right now has a balance of $29,500 and some odd dollars, so call it $30,000. But that's under the assessor's control until the select board requests it.
Well, I'm looking at the free cash amount. You've apparently obligated in the last couple of weeks some $89,000 from various things, some of which I don't fully understand, like the town hall steeple and stuff like that, radio. I'm not sure what you're doing.
Well, that radio,
Yeah,
you weren't here for that discussion?
no.
No, you weren't. Were you here, Tom?
I was here.
I mean, that's probably been 2 years, hasn't it been, Paulette, or ever since you've been on the board? That, talking about these dead spots in town where there's no communication.
Yeah, from fire and chief and police.
Police and even, well, I guess ambulance is covered because they work on a different frequency.
Right.
But Bill Perlman was in, and through the Franklin County Regional Government, who does our radio maintenance and all that business,
Yeah.
they have been able to put together a plan to get coverage for this southwest corner of town,
Yeah.
which, Diane, you can speak to it, right? It's horrible. I mean, it's horrible. And by doing that, we need to pay to put up the equipment on a tower that's actually in Plainfield. And they've got permission, they've got equipment, we need to pay for that. And then it becomes property of the Franklin County Regional Government, so the maintenance going forward
Goes to them.
is part of our, and it's split amongst the whole county, you know, it's part of our assessment on that.
Yeah.
So this has been a problem for a number of years. It's been like Bill Perlman said, he says, at least now it has some momentum. He would hate to see it stop,
Yeah.
to have this problem addressed. And I know the fire chief has been in several times to discuss it. Really kind of warned me out a little bit on talking about radios, but that's what that number is that one-time expense to get those antennas set up.
And town hall steeple?
Town hall steeple actually started out with Stuart Harris and the building committee coming and saying that there is problems with the very intricate skeleton, those long posts that come down into the tower that need to be replaced. And the number he had is he thought it would be in the neighborhood of $85,000. We don't have $85,000 in there, but we have a down payment on that, be it kind of small.
Could it be less than 30?
What's that?
Could it be less than 30,000?
Could that down payment be less than 30? It's possible.
And are we getting bids from other people to do this? And wasn't the steeple just repaired, taken all apart or something?
That was about 25 years ago.
That was 25 years ago. Was the last time it was
Actually,
looked
I
at?
think it was more than 25 years ago. I'm trying to remember if I was married when the steeple was on the ground.
86, I think. Went back up at
86, so yeah,
86.
maybe I was.
The columns that need replacing are ones that were not replaced at that time, so they're,
84, so,
who knows how old.
yeah.
Stuart knows, I don't.
So that was 30 years ago that the steeple was on the ground and got rebuilt. So, but this is really the frame underneath, the part that actually holds the steeple up, the way I understand it. But that would be a project that would have to be bid out because Stuart was it's nothing that he feels that local talent's going to be able to tackle.
Well, you go back to your question about where you want to look at free cash. Given what has been tentatively committed already, this $89,000 out of $250,000 we have here on this sheet, you've got a balance of $161. My sense is that we shouldn't go lower than $50,000 in terms of free cash. But, as we heard tonight, Voc Ed is likely to come in some $122,000 with more expenses. I don't know if we've got any other surprises. We just whittled away a little bit at the police department here, a few $1,000s. I think we're going to have to go through and kind of do a, go through this with a fine-tooth comb and figure out where else we can do a little trimming here and there. It might be kind of a process of 1,000 cuts to make it happen. But, I feel uncomfortable if we got below $50,000 in free cash. I would hope we could avoid at all costs invading stabilization. I think that's got to be protected at this point. Our committee went through this recent draft of a policy manual that looks to keep the combination of free cash and stabilization somewhere in the 10 to 15% range of the overall budget. I think we're getting tight. Right now we're pretty comfortable, but we've already started to use free cash and with help pay for the roads and so on. So
You're not comfortable if you're looking at the 15%.
No, absolutely not. I don't know, what do you, Tom, any views on that?
Ted,
Yep.
if you go to page 2,
Yes.
the column for FY15,
Yes.
and you go down to where we had the salary. and the
Thank you, Diane.
That's a net increase of roughly about 13,000. Because the numbers that are entered there for 15 are lower than what we just worked over. So, although you had a savings over the year before on the spreadsheet,
Yeah.
it's an upward number.
What number? The
Page 2.
Page 2 for the
For
police.
FY15.
Right, none of the changes presented tonight.
Right, yeah, but it's just when Ted was talking and he said a savings, it is a savings over 14, but on the spreadsheet it's an increase.
That's a good catch, I didn't see that, you're right. 41,600 should be, well, is 49,400 based on what we talked about. And the police department expenses instead of 39,552 should be 45,105. So when Mary addresses this master sheet up, it's
It's going to go up
worse.
more.
Yeah. I see that you cut the OPEB fund down to, I think, was it $2,000?
Yes.
But I think that's just fine because it's more than anything a gesture in that direction to say, we gotta get started, just put a little cash in there and get going.
And Ron and Mary both went to a legislative breakfast where one of the big topics was that the OPEB numbers that have been thrown out there are vastly overstated.
I could well imagine. Yeah.
The legal expense line, wasn't there talk about
Oh, yeah.
bumping that up?
20.
Tom had a good idea.
What's that?
Leave it at 10 and hope it doesn't happen. You guys will get the
And
things
have to
straightened
go
out
to a
for next.
special, have to go to a special meeting or whatever, pull it out. Deal with it later if it goes up, leave it at 10. It's another way to approach it.
It's another way to approach it.
Hoping and wishing have never really been a strong strategy.
No, they haven't.
How about praying?
Framework.
Let's pitch 20 in there now and then we'll see what number.
All right, so you're talking 24,000 more, which I assume comes out of free cash. The other thing we haven't talked about was the truck. At the last meeting, I thought we talked about pulling 70,000 out for the truck out of free cash.
I think that was just a really brief discussion. We didn't talk about taking 70 out. We didn't put 70 in that column.
No, I got it over another because we don't know what what those pieces
Debt
are.
exclusion?
I bet exclusion, but there was a hope that maybe we could meet some of the with cash.
We're thinking 70 with free cash and then like a 50-50. I know you just threw it out there, but
I mean, Paulette even had last week an idea maybe that maybe dip into stabilization to start paying for that.
to start paying for.
To take the edge off of the truck.
This is what they look at, the debt exclusions.
Yeah.
I had this ambulance building, the dump truck, 70 from free cash.
We went from 1 year of putting a bunch into stabilization and now
Well,
1
just-
year later, yanking
I'm
out.
not saying take a lot out, Tom, but I am saying that it's an opportunity that maybe you might look at taking, only financing $150,000 and paying for the balance, whatever that is, out of stabilization. And that would knock you down to 3 principal payments of $50,000.
That's conceivable, yeah.
I mean, we're getting to the point where there's a lot of ways to skin this cat.
The truck was what, 167 was estimated?
Yeah, 167,
So 17 on a stabilization, maybe $50,000 payments.
And there was also something that we were thinking about last meeting with the debt exclusion was the school district phase 1 plan of Mohawk and Sanderson, our part that they came up with. They were thinking about going into debt exclusion, 26,000 and 37,000.
Right, there's 2 debt exclusion questions.
Yeah.
Right?
I wasn't here.
I was not,
I wasn't here, that was
I
this
wasn't
year.
here.
So there's a debt exclusion question that Mohawk Trail Regional School District asked us to put out there to a 5-year improvement plan, first of 3 phases.
Yeah.
And, that it would be a capital expense and it would require every town to approve the debt.
Yeah.
And the board voted to put that on the ballot. In full disclosure, so you don't have to dig through the minutes, I voted against it.
Yeah.
because I feel that there's a lot of questions that aren't being answered or addressed, having to do with school population and some of the really tough decisions that I think this school district has to make as far as, do we need so many buildings? And I think we're being baited, my personal opinion is, we're being baited into pouring more money into these buildings that may or may not be used. And I think the only leverage the towns have is to not allow this to go through until they come up with a long-term plan that's a little more money gets to be spent on education than on buildings.
Yeah.
So that was my position. Paulette and Ron, of course, have a different one, which is fine.
Is this the sort of thing that will be addressed at the April 9th meeting that I hear about, where there's a chance to come and get
Yes.
clarification on these capital issues?
Yes.
Is that it?
And isn't your committee too going to help give us some more information, the committee that you're
Yeah,
on?
I guess it's no worth it to say that on the 24th of this month, we are going to be in Ashfield. We've been in Heath, Holly last, and actually they're going to be in Charlemont when I'm on vacation, but the 24th of April, they'll be in this room.
You get the part that one plan was for Sanderson and then one was for Mohawk Union District.
Right. Did you get this handout? You must have.
Last week
No,
or 2 weeks
2
ago?
weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
I got it 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, and it's in your.
But it's been updated. She says I'm sending a correction to the preliminary
Oh,
capital
yep,
assessment.
it's in your package.
Yeah, and it's pretty well explained.
Yeah.
It's pretty well explained. It's got the high school there, and it's got the Sanderson Academy.
Yeah, okay, I see.
Two different payouts on it. Because last week we did talk about 5 and 10 years. Yeah, the long-range planning committee meets twice a month. I think we're making some headway. We've gone through a lot of data collection. One of the first missions that we discussed was getting data correct and properly referencing it. And one of the ones that we've come up with most recently deals with vacancy. In the two that were provided to us by the school district, we chose not to use because there were some issues with them. And instead we used the design capacity, what the schools were actually designed for. This was a committee decision to do that. And it makes the buildings appear more full. They're still 50% at least underutilized as opposed to 66% or something like that. But and the issue doesn't go away. But we're just trying to get all our ducks in order, because if you don't have sound data, it's hard to make good decisions. And we're starting to approach the regional agreement now, because a regional agreement is the one that says very specifically that if there's going to be any change in the elementary schools, it's going to be a unanimous sort of decision. And we're hoping that since a lot of select board members are on this long-range planning committee, with the exception of Plainfield, they're the only ones that don't have someone. Bob Ashback is there, but he's not a select board member. We're hoping we can convince the district to modify the regional agreement so that it works on the principle of a democracy rather than a unanimous vote. And not talk about school closures or anything like that. It's nothing to do with that. It's just a dysfunctional agreement the way it stands now. It's almost, we're really tied at the wrist as to what we can do. And it's really unfortunate. So that's an update on that. But you're welcome to come see a PowerPoint projection show that we have with a lot of good data and such. I think my concern about this is these are assets, whether they're open or closed, these buildings, and we have a duty to protect assets. And I think while we're thinking about it, we still have a duty to protect assets, and this expense won't come, of course, until 16, right? If it was that was the thought I had. And such.
Can I have naturally, but those were great, added to great conclusions.
Tom?
So just a quick addition, I added the 121,700 for the school, 20,000 for extra, or 10,000 for the extra lawyer fees, and the 14,000 for the extra police fees. So we're looking at 145,000 more that were added to this budget.
Are you adding in the school that we just talked about?
Yeah,
Because that won't be till 16. It will still be there and go forward, but.
Not the school capital, you didn't put the school capital. did you?
no, not the
No.
school capital,
No, you put vocational.
vocational,
The vocational.
the vocational.
Right.
So just adding those three numbers together, what we added in tonight,
Yeah.
we're looking at 145,700 more on the budget.
Yeah.
With
free
only,
cash.
huh?
That depletes free cash.
Yeah, we only have 161,000 for the way we run the budget on free
Yeah,
cash.
and I think before we started tonight, we still had a deficit of about $30,000.
Yeah, I think we did.
And that
About
doesn't-
22,750.
Yeah. And a quick question, we have 88,000 down full payment in 1-year note on the grader. Did you want to do anything differently with that or not?
I mean, that's the debt exclusion. I mean, if we wanted to relieve some burden on that'll have no bearing on the levy, right? But if we were feeling that we needed to relieve the tax rate, the tax bill, we could cut that, we could renew half of that note and only pay 44. But if we're talking about going forward with the truck, if we're in a position to clean it up, I mean, it is 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but I think we have to look at what our debt service is over time, and Ted, you gave us that really good spreadsheet of what we need.
Yeah.
And they march one after another, there's no relief in sight.
And I think what's really kind of curious about that on the bottom is there really isn't, when you take the years,
Yeah.
there isn't a lot of variance on the bottom.
No,
They're all marching right around 150. I think 1 year it goes up to 220, doesn't it?
no. Well, 285 is this year, 167 is the coming year, that's the truck. Then 180, then 67, 162, 175, so you're around 150 every year of some kind of
150,
renewal.
160.
You're going to keep replacing stuff. Now that's primarily highway and a couple of guesses at the police department and fire engine, so we may be off, but in principle, there's that kind of a continuing requirement, seems to me, for equipment.
I mean, it looks to me like even if we renewed this note for 44,000, it would still be at a very low interest rate, but
Yeah.
I'm afraid we'd be looking at 44,000 next year plus 50,000, let's say, for the truck.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And what's our debt? What's the debt that we need to pay this year? The debt we need to pay this year is, well, you always have that 80,000 for the garage, so that's $48,000 for the fire truck.
Yeah. Yeah, the garage,
Totals on the next page.
the highway garage is in perpetuity, I think.
It's
80 grand.
It feels that way.
223, 647.
Yeah.
Just kick myself if we had set 40 grand aside for the same amount of time, going back in time, instead of the 80, right? We would have avoided all the interest and we would have had the same thing.
A golden sledgehammer, Paulette, that's what we could have. We could appropriate for a golden sledgehammer for any of us that live long enough to see it paid off. Tommy, you could be in the running for that pretty much.
That's right.
Are you closing in on the end of this meeting while we're all depressed, or you got something that's more hopeful ahead of us here?
I really don't have anything hopeful at all. except that on the 21st, there's going to have to be a warrant, and not that there won't be some tidying up that may have to be done after that.
Well, let's just talk for a moment. How are we set for future meetings? Because are we at a point, David will have something for us about VOCAD within about a week and a half, I guess. And that might be good news, if he can pull it together, we don't have more applications and so on. With the reduced pads, and that could be a saving grace for us. I don't know, I don't count on it. But what other meetings do we need to have to make this all happen?
We have a select board meeting next week.
Yeah.
I got an idea that we'll be discussing at least a draft of the warrant.
Yep.
There's a couple of articles that have come in by petition.
One would involve.
So,
You're meeting April 7th, but you don't need the finance committee, do you?
no,
You won't have time for this.
but, and then we'll meet again on
14th?
14th is our next.
14th is our next
That's a budget
meeting.
Yeah, okay.
And then the following week is the 21st when we'll,
Well, I
and it
think,
doesn't mean that if we sign a warrant on the 21st, we'll have the skeleton of what's going to be there. That doesn't mean there can't be a couple of meetings between then and the 3rd to come to what the actual motions would be to polish the doorknobs on.
so we should point for April 14th, that Monday, which will be kind of a full-scale review of this whole master budget sheet. And Mary, would you, when you get this dressed up after tonight's discussion, be able to send us all copies of what you've got so we can kind of look at it one more time and check our math and so on?
Yep. Is that going to be the 14th one of our meetings with them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's been posted, has it?
Check. And we might, if you guys are amenable, maybe meet half an hour early to go for a few minutes and just
Okay.
clean up.
Do the two articles reference finance committee though? Do they have to deal with money?
One of them would, one is for the sidewalks,
Oh, it is, I didn't know that, okay. And the other?
and the other is
5:15.
Artus Lane. It's community control resolution about having,
The pipeline.
it
Oh, okay.
started with the pipeline and goes on from there to other issues.
All right.
So, as the select board, there's, oh, the only other thing, we need to start getting something in the newspaper.
Everything?
Right?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Maybe, well, we need to start putting some of this, what we're talking about, in some form to get it ready to be in some newspaper.
Yes. Yes.
And if somebody would write it besides me, that probably would cause a lot less weight.
Well, yeah.
And a quick note before you get into that, we did send, the town clerk sent the ballot to the Ashfield News, so people will start seeing right away that there are going to be 3 debt exclusion questions.
Okay.
We're not doing the one for the ambulance building, but the
Yeah,
highway and the 2 school,
two school things.
just so that people are prepared if people start asking about that.
Check, well, Tom Poisson, I think, provides stuff for us about the truck, which is important. I think that's a big piece of equipment that needs to be explained to people so they understand what they're voting for.
Okay, I'll see Tom tomorrow morning.
All right. I think he earlier seemed to acknowledge the value of that, and so he's probably prepared to do it. He hasn't yet. Do you want me to take it out and try something for the paper?
I appreciate it.
This is for the recorder or?
Whoever will take it, but by when
Recorder.
do we need something like that? Mid-month?
Well, I think we could put it into the, I keep wanting to call it the West County, but the Independent, it can go in there anytime.
Yeah.
I think that, the Ashfield News is gonna come out on the 1st.
First.
And
And when do we meet? The 4th or the 6th or something?
the 3rd.
The 3rd? That'll be tight.
So if we can get some of this out in the recorder or in the independent, I think that those would be wise things.
All right.
I wasn't even having a thought of the earlier we did it and we got some feedback on it, maybe we could address that before town meeting.
You know, Buckland, I hate to keep comparing us to Buckland, however, their finance committee generates absolutely whiz-bang 6 to 7 page itemization of each warrant article in which the finance committee parses the issue, gives their recommendation and stuff like that. It's, I think, almost more detailed than I could ever manage, but elements of that approach might be useful here to try and get something out in front of people, because we've talked about that in the past, and it's so much more helpful if people come, even if they got different views. In fact, that's the value of it, to say, you know, some people like this, some people don't, but here's the stuff, here's the grist of the argument. You know, here are the pros and the cons, maybe, to get people animated about this, so it's not just one of these perfunctory, we show up, we raise our hands, we go away.
You mean to have a pile of them that people can pick up, come and go, come.
Well, they could, but I mean, even the newspaper articles try to kind of flag kind of the bigger issues.
Yeah.
You know, vogue ed, this is a big surprise to us in some ways. So it's a function of our obligation and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Here it is. It's big.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
Mary just handed it out, that's the 2013 version that the finance committee sent to the select board. And to the
One of the
citizens.
selectmen just sent it to me this week.
Right.
And if you have article on article, a long one, in the newspaper, people probably won't read it.
Right.
If you had like one warrant and we could give our opinion,
Yeah.
the next
Yeah.
paper that came out, you know, or not one, a couple of warrants.
I don't think you can discuss the whole warrant, but I think you can discuss the high points, the things that are,
All right.
Yeah.
that we've
That's a
discussed
lot.
again and again.
That's a lot of writing.
And something might be missed and something
All
might
right.
be too much.
All right.
So no, if you would do that, and I'll talk to Tommy,
All right.
okay? There's 2 other things on our warrant, or on our agenda rather, and we already voted on one, for me to sign the DHCD contract. I just want to confirm that that was correct, but I think we took care of that last week when MJ was here, correct?
Right.
So,
Do you need the finance committee any further?
I just wanted to ask you about the elevator.
the elevator thing is the next thing we'll get to, but I'm gonna sign this letter so we can get 300 and some odd thousand dollars, how's that?
There are 2 copies, we need to sign both.
Stood up the people, decisions about lifting trying to get them to give us a 5-year window.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. I actually heard about it.
Who's the procurement officer, Mary?
Makes sense.
Me,
You
you,
the church.
whatever.
Yeah, also the church. Because they're supposed to go April 23rd, and the decision is joint committee.
Oh, that's it, the
A
town
couple of bills that are.
treasurer? The treasurer? Was she saying
We
that?
vote for it, but I thought that the select board would,
There must be the select board?
Hmm?
There must be the select board?
Select board is administrator, and I do the procurement stuff.
Oh, okay.
You're this,
That long,
you know,
we got
the
dinner.
I
executive
didn't know if there
board.
was, I was trying to remember, I've seen it before, whether, who's what it was, there's someone who does have this sign.
No, that was particular,
Yeah, that's,
but, anything.
Okay, those are signed.
That's right.
All right, Ted, what do you want to do on these elevators? Blast them right into orbit? Elevator, you want us to sign some letters because the elevator,
Yeah, I've drafted a letter for your consideration, and it basically asks you to simply prompt the, Steve Kulik, who's our representative, and
Senator
Ben
Downing.
Downing, who's our senator, to put a little pressure on those co-chairs, Timothy and Naughton, of this joint committee on public safety and homeland security, because from what I saw in the paper, somebody said by April 23rd, that joint committee has got to report out, hopefully favorably, on a couple of these bills about lift inspections, in particular, from our standpoint here in town, seeing if they can't make these things every 5 years for the infrequent users of small lifts. It's currently an annual inspection. The best we were able to do most recently was to get at least all 4 lifts in town, the library, our 2 here in the town hall, and the one at the church across the way, all inspected on one day, which I understand has at least saved some money, not on the inspection fee paid to the state, but on the cost that we have to pay Garavanta, who was the vendor who came and ran the lifts for these guys. What we've done in the meantime, you should understand, is we've also applied to FERCog to be included in their bid going out this spring or summer, I understand, to, in effect, do a group buy and see if they can get Eagle Elevator or Garavanta or some vendor, I think it's currently Eagle, to do some 34 lifts in this region on kind of a mass contract, where my understanding is instead of paying, I don't know, $600 per visit by the vendor company, it's more like $200. So they get a contract, they got a volume of business, and they'll do it cheaper. So we're in line for that, which should help. But this, in effect, says, why do we have to do this every year, when in the past it was every 5 years? And because these are being so infrequent, I think the view is it's a little bit onerous for us to have to keep paying up this money every year. On top of which...
So this is really a follow-up letter from the letter that we already sent October 7th.
Yes.
And this is going, again, directly to the legislators to modify change in the law.
That's all it is. It's just, and it's calling to their attention the previous letter we sent. If you include that as an enclosure, it gives all the background. It says why we're doing what we're doing. But this is just reminding them, saying, please urge these guys to pass this legislation. You know, they go nowhere.
Would you like me to read the letter?
Oh, sure.
Should distracted. Senator Dowling and Representative Kula. Enclosed as background information is a copy of the letter that our select board sent on October 7th, 2013. It is our understanding that in order for any relief to be legislated this year, the Joint Committee on Public Safety and Homeland Security must report out the pertinent bills favorably by April 23rd, 2014. On behalf of our town and select board, I ask you to contact the chairs of that joint committee to urge them to act soon to pass the bills that would help alleviate our situation by extending the inspection period or allowing for waivers to extend the inspection period. We look forward to hearing back from you about this matter. Sincerely yours, Thomas S. Scott, Chairman. Is there a motion?
Yes, I move that we sign, or authorize you to sign the letter on behalf of the select board.
I'll second
Send
that.
it.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's okay.
Motion and second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. It's unanimous.
Thanks for doing that, Ted.
Same thing as my trustees. Maybe that's
There's 2 copies. Are you just keeping one for the file? Is that?
I send you an original to each of the 2 addressed, and then copies to the other 2.
So I'll sign.
Sign the second.
And last time we wrote this kind of letter, it went to Stan Rosenberg. Was he our senator at that time? I don't know. But
We
these are-
have,
These are the people I think that are relevant.
yeah.
If you think of anyone else, you know those, or I can take them.
Actually, I don't believe Stan Rosenberg would ever be a waste of time with his position being.
Yeah.
So should we add that copy here?
Copy it if you want.
Good afternoon.
Thanks for doing that.
All
I
right.
have an agenda question
Yes.
for you and Ron. Is there any time in the future during April? Or do you want to do a meeting just for the purpose of finishing the rest of the personnel policies manual and get it after the first meeting? It doesn't have to be answered today, I just wanted to brought up this possibility that we can meet that up and then get it in the revised form over to town council. Request to squeeze it in here.
Yeah, well, it won't be long, I will be hard pressed to make any meetings, never mind extra ones, but
Just a thought.
we'll take a look at it.
Well, when you-
There's a lot, I mean, I reviewed it, there's a lot in there to be gone through and talked about, so I think that we do it in one night, we circulate that.
I was thinking like if we had 3 hours, what could be accomplished with it? Then have the personnel board start getting it together and get it over to town council.
I've got a bunch of edits, Paula, because it was on the agenda a while ago.
Right.
I don't really know when we're going to see the light of day next with all this budget stuff, which seems so critical.
When are you back on?
I get back on the 12th,
Oh,
so I'll miss next week's meeting.
So that kind of, we'll have to shadow it around that. I'm hoping that we can move through stuff so we don't have to have an extra meeting to visit the budget.
Yeah.
I think we have it pretty well laid out. If we stick with it, we won't have to have an extra meeting unless we have to have one a week just prior to town meeting.
And the warrant too has some unusual things in it this year that is also part of the discussion of the budget before we go back.
All right, anything else? Motion to adjourn? Wait, you got something? I have it on my calendar.
And I have this food, I don't know if it's food, not that I get roads.
I don't need the answer.
No, I'm just wondering.
My schedule is right now that I'm watching the weather for the end of the week, wondering how busy I'll be on the weekend, so. So, was there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay.
have you heard anything about the grader?
No.
No, okay. That's it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Adjourned at 10:43.